Before the great Seljuk Empire was founded, whose borders extended to the Sir Darya in the east, the Aegean and the Marmara Seas in the west, the Caucasus in the north, and Egypt in the south, let's talk about the political situation of Central and Western Asia. In the lands stretching from the east of the Caspian Sea to the middle of the Sir Darya, the Oghuz Yabgu state was ruling. To the west of the Oghuz, who were the main part of the Göktürk state, were the Khazar and Bulgar Turkish states. To the north were the Kimaks, and to the south was the Islamic world. The Oghuz Yabgu state, made up mostly of nomadic Oghuz tribes including the Kinnik tribe, which the Seljuks belonged to, was governed by leaders with the titles of Yabgu Deputy Kulurkan, Subashi, commander of the army, Tarhan, and Yunal. The state was a union of tribes, connected by a feudal bond to the Yabgu through their beys. All important matters of the state were discussed in a Kurultai, council, attended by the tribal beys. The main cities were Yengikent, Jend, Sabran, Sutkent, Salchi, Atlı, and Ordu. The Oghuz were made up of 24 tribes, 12 from Bozok and 12 from Uchok. The Oghuz were neighbors to the Volga, Itil, and Khwarezm regions. They were also on the trade route from the Islamic world to the Khazars and Bulgars, so they had economic and cultural relations with Muslims. However, even though some Khazars and Volga Bulgars had converted to Islam, the Oghuz continued to follow their shamanist sky god religion. But in the middle of the 10th century, Islam started to spread quickly, especially in the cities of the Oghuz, located in the lower parts of the Sir Darya. It seems that until the year 992, the Oghuz Yabgu state was under the strong influence of the Khazars. After the Uyghur state was destroyed by the Kyrgyz in 840, the Karakhanid state was founded with Kashgar as its capital. Especially after the death of Satuk Bugra Khan during the rule of Arslan Khan, lands like Fergana and nearby areas were taken from the Samanids. Finally, during the rule of Ilig Nasr Khan, in 999, the lands of the Samanids in Transoxiana were taken, and the borders of the Karakhanid state reached from the Amu Darya to central Tarim. But as seen in many other Turkish states, the Karakhanid state was divided into two parts in 1042, Western and Eastern. The Western Karakhanids, with capitals in Uzgend and Samarkand, ruled Transoxiana and Fergana up to Kujund. The Eastern Karakhanid state, with capitals in Balasagun and Kashgar, ruled over Talas, Isfijab, Shash, East Fergana, Yarkand, and Hotan. Soon, both parts came under the rule of the great Seljuk Empire. Later, both were ruled by the Kara Khitans. Finally, the eastern part ended in 1211, and the western part was destroyed by the Khwarezm Shahs in 1212. With the strong efforts of Samanolu Asad's 4 sons, who served as Abbasid governors in various cities of Transoxiana, the foundations of Samanid rule in the region began to form. The Samanid state was officially established during the time of Nasr bin Ahmad, after it was recognized by the Abbasid Caliphate. During the rule of later kings, especially under Ismail, the borders of the state expanded greatly in the north, south, east, and west. Transoxiana and Khorasan were brought under control, and the small local emirates in these areas became dependent on the Samanids. Especially during the reign of Nasr, who ruled for 29 years, science, culture, language, and literature reached a very high level in the Samanid land. Many famous scholars, poets, and writers were trained, and they wrote very valuable works. However, during the rule of later kings, who were not very capable, the borders of the state began to shrink. Especially with the rise of the Buyids in the west, and the Karakhanids and Ghaznavids in the east, the Samanid state could not avoid collapse. The efforts of the last Samanid ruler, Ismail Muntasir, to save the state were not successful. Even though he received help from the Seljuks, he could not resist the Karakhanids and Ghaznavids. In the end, the Samanid state completely disappeared from history, and its lands were divided between the Karakhanids and the Ghaznavids. The Ghaznavids, on the other hand, were a Turkish state that appeared during the time of the Samanid collapse. At first, this state was dependent on the Samanids, and it was founded with the great efforts of Ali Tegin, who was the commander-in-chief of the Samanid army in Khorasan. Seljuk Empire, a Samanid governor whom Ali Tegin trusted very much, strengthened the foundations of the independent Ghaznavid state. In a short time, their rule spread into Baluchistan, Tokharistan, Zamindawar, and finally to Peshawar. Later, under the rule of Mahmud, the Ghaznavids became fully independent and were officially recognized by the Abbasid caliphate. They shared the Samanid lands with the Karakhanids. Thus, regions like Sistan, Juzjan, Chaganian, Khutal, and Khwarazm were added to the Ghaznavid territory. Later, Sultan Mahmud made 17 campaigns into India, helping the spread of Islam in that country. Because of this, he became known as a famous hero in the Islamic world. In the last years of his reign, Sultan Mahmud allowed the Seljuks and many Turkmen groups to cross from Transoxiana into Khorasan. This created serious problems for the Ghaznavid state and made it easier for the great Seljuk Empire to be established in Ghaznavid lands. The Buyid state, founded by Abu Shuja Buwai and later joined by his 3 sons, Imad al-Dawla Ali, Rukn al-Dawla Hassan, and Mu'iz al-Dawla Ahmad, developed rapidly thanks to their great efforts. This Persian-origin state quickly took control of Isfahan, Jibal, Kerman, Khuzestan, and nearby areas. Ahmad even entered Baghdad in 945 and took control of the city. Ahmad's son, Adud al-Dawla Fana Khusraw, expanded the state's borders to their widest by taking Iraq, southern Iran, and Oman, and weakening the Hamdanids in Jazira, the Ziyarids in Tabaristan, and the Samanids in Khorasan. However, after his death, disagreements and conflicts started within the family. As a result of the Ghaznavids' rise and later Sultan Tugrul's efforts to dominate the Islamic world, the Buyid state collapsed. Still, some members of the family continued to exist politically for a while as vassal rulers. Arslan al-Basiri, a Turkish-origin Buyid governor in Baghdad, cooperated with the Shiite Fatimids of Egypt and Arab leaders Quraysh and Dubays. On 28 November 1058, he took advantage of Tugrul Bey's absence from the city due to the rebellion of Ibrahim Yunal and occupied Baghdad. He captured Caliph al-Qaim bi-Amrillah and imprisoned him in the fortress of Haditha Ana on the Euphrates. But Tugrul Bey, after suppressing Ibrahim Yunal's rebellion, came back to Baghdad, defeated Basasiri, and freed the caliph, returning him to his position. Thus, Arslan al-Basasiri's efforts to spread Shi'ism and make it the dominant sect were completely ended. The Abbasids, who came from Abbas ibn Abd al-Muttalib, the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad, ended the Umayyad dynasty after a long struggle, especially after the Battle of the Great Zab, and established the Abbasid Caliphate named after their family. After the first Abbasid Caliph, Abu al-Abbas al-Safa, his brother Abu Ja'far al-Mansur became caliph. He moved the capital of the caliphate to Baghdad, turning the focus of the caliphate towards the east. Mansur solved many serious internal problems that troubled the caliphate and brought peace and stability to the country. The Iranian-origin Barmakid family played a major role in this success. However, during the rule of Caliph al-Mahdi, some sectarian conflicts appeared in Khorasan, and successful wars were fought against Byzantium. After the short reign of al-Hadi, Harun al-Rashid became caliph. At the beginning of his rule, Arab power in Asia had reached a high point. The administration of the caliphate was generally well organized and effective, thanks to Harun al-Rashid's capable leadership and the support of the Barmakid family. However, during the later years of Harun al-Rashid and in the following caliphs' reigns, in the 9th century, the political unity of the caliphate began to break apart. A branch of the Umayyad family established an independent government in Spain, and North Africa lost its connection with the center. An independent state was also founded in Egypt by the Tulunids. In Transoxiana and Khorasan, the Tahirids, Samanids, and Safarids broke away from the caliphate and formed independent states. As a result, the power of the Abbasid Caliphate outside Iraq had almost completely collapsed. The Shiite Fatimid Caliphate, which was established in Egypt and North Africa, became a threat to the Sunni Abbasid Caliphate by taking control of lands from the Red Sea to the Atlantic Ocean. Finally, the Shiite Buyids, who had established and expanded their rule in Iran and Iraq, occupied Baghdad during the reign of Caliph al-Mustakfi and took control of the government. However, after the year 1040, the rapidly expanding Sunni Seljuk Empire gained the material power and strength of the Islamic world. As a result, the Abbasid Caliphate was saved from the pressure and threat of first the Buyid and then the Fatimid Caliphates. One of the great states of the Middle East was the Fatimid state. This state was established in North Africa with the efforts of the Ismaili missionaries, known as Shiites, Hussein bin Ahmad from Sana'a and Ubaid Allah al-Mahdi. The attempts to expand the borders of the Fatimid state slowed down for a long time during the second caliph, Abu al-Qasim Muhammad al-Qaim, because of a dangerous rebellion started by Yazid al-Khariji. Basically, under the rule of Caliph al-Muiz, Lidin Allah, and his son al-Aziz Billah, the state's borders included countries stretching from the Red Sea to the Atlantic Ocean, Hadramaut, Yemen, Hejaz, Palestine, Syria, and all of North Africa. However, due to the weakness of the Fatimid administration that started during the rule of Caliph al-Hakim and became more visible under Caliph al-Zahir, many provinces of the caliphate saw bloody uprisings. Because of this, the administrative ties of these provinces with Egypt were almost completely broken. Still, during the long reign of al-Zahir's son, al-Mustansir, the Fatimids experienced their most glorious period. Although conflicts with Byzantium continued, after the Seljuks conquered Syria and Palestine and established a state there, the Fatimids formed good relations with Byzantium against the Seljuks. Also in this period, Ismaili missionaries continued their activities in faraway regions like Yemen and Sindh. Even the Sunni Islamic capital, Baghdad, was briefly occupied by the Fatimids in 1058, and the Abbasid Caliph al-Qa'im bi Amrillah was taken captive. However, with the intervention of Sultan Tugrul of the Great Seljuk Empire, who had become the representative of Sunni Islam's material power, the Abbasid Caliphate was saved from Fatimid control. During the rule of Caliph al-Mustansir, who gave wide responsibilities to Turks in the administration, great unrest began to appear in Egypt in the middle of his reign. After the capable vizier Abu al-Qasim al-Jarjarai, Abu Sa'd became vizier. He was killed in 1047 during a conflict between Turkish and Berber forces in the army. His brother Abu Nasr Harun took his place, but soon after, Abu Muhammad Hassan al-Yazuri became the Fatimid vizier. At this time, unrest and economic problems in Egypt and the provinces became very serious. The caliph, in order to fix the state's financial situation, started actions that made things worse, such as placing money penalties on the people and seizing their properties. Meanwhile, dangerous Arab uprisings in the Delta region were only stopped with great difficulty. Also, the tension between the Turks, Berbers, and Sudanese in the army had become extremely dangerous. With the worsening of the civil administration and the treasury being empty, military groups began to fight for power. Nasir al-Dawla from the Hamdanid family worked with the Turks and Berbers and succeeded in completely removing the Sudanese between the years 1062 to 1067. However, soon after, Nasir al-Dawla wanted to take control over the caliph as well. He had to fight both against the caliph and against powerful leaders of the caliphate, such as the Turkish commanders Ildinis and Badr al-Jamali, who had become his rivals. In this difficult situation, Nasir al-Dawla asked the Seljuk Sultan Alp Arslan for help and invited him to Egypt. However, he also gathered some Arab and Berber forces and managed to take control in Cairo and the Delta region. But soon after, in 1073, he was killed by Ildinis, along with all his close allies. Meanwhile, since 1067, Egypt had been suffering from a great famine. The country was in deep poverty. Because of this, many people had to migrate to Syria and Iraq. To save the country from this chaos and misery, Caliph al-Mustansir invited the governor of Akka, Badr al-Jamali, to Egypt and asked him to take control of the state. Badr al-Jamali, who was Armenian by origin, had been raised by the Syrian leader Jamal al-Dawla. Before becoming vizier of al-Mustansir, he had twice served as governor of Damascus. Later, while governor of Akka, he became famous for his good rule. When Badr al-Jamali was called to Egypt, he brought with him his trusted Armenian guard unit, formed in Damascus and Akka. He secretly came to Cairo one night and found that the caliph was under heavy pressure. The Turkish, Berber, and Sudanese leaders, who failed to understand the reason for Badr al-Jamali's arrival, were all killed in one night. By taking control in this way, Badr al-Jamali ended the anarchy in the country and achieved great success in restoring peace and order. However, the situation in the Fatimid land was still not good. Especially in the late 11th century, after the founding of 3 crusader states in southern Anatolia, Syria, and Palestine, the Fatimids began to lose land. The Fatimid viziers cooperated with the Turkish ruler of Syria, Nur al-Din Mahmud, who dealt strong blows to the crusaders. But after a while, the Fatimid caliphate collapsed from within. As the caliphs lost their power during this time, viziers began to control the government. Finally, in the last days of Caliph al-Adid, the Fatimid caliphate was ended by Salah al-Din Ayyubi, one of the commanders of Nur al-Din Mahmud. Thus, the Sunni Ayyubid state was founded in Egypt and North Africa. In the Middle East, there was a great Christian state called the Byzantine Empire. The death of Basil II, who gave Byzantium its most glorious period after Justinian, was a turning point for the empire. Because after him, during the rule of the following emperors, Byzantium went through decline and disorder. This period lasted until the rise of Alexios Komnenos. However, this rule ended when Zoe married Constantine IX Monomachos. Monomachos then took the imperial throne. During Monomachos' rule, the civil government became stronger than the army. As a result, the number of soldiers was reduced, and most of the Byzantine army was made up of paid soldiers from different nations. Also, important government positions were given to scholars like Selos, Xiphilinos, and Moropus. As a negative result of this policy, some generals who were removed from duty started rebellions. These rebellions were suppressed, but with difficulty. In foreign affairs, The Pechenegs, who caused trouble along the Danube, were brought under control, but the Normans who had settled in southern Italy started invading Byzantine lands. However, the empire's eastern borders were more stable than the west. While good relations continued with the Fatimids of Egypt, conflicts with the Seljuks, who were conquering Anatolia, continued. After Monomachos died, Theodora took the Byzantine throne. During her one-year rule, the empire was not in a good situation either internally or externally. After Theodora, Michael VI became emperor. He gave big titles and gifts to members of the civil group who supported him, but the army commanders rebelled. In the end, Isakios was declared emperor, and the army took power again. After his death, Constantine X Ducas became emperor. Although peace was made with the Hungarians who crossed the Danube and attacked 1 year later, they still managed to capture Belgrade in 1064. In 1065, because of pressure from the Cumans, the Oghuz Turks left the Caspian region, crossed the Danube, and raided areas as far as Macedonia and Thessaly. The Normans also continued their attacks on Byzantine lands. After Ducas died, his wife Eudokia became empress for her 3 sons. However, because different political groups in the palace interfered in the government carelessly, the provinces and army were badly neglected. Because of all these reasons, there were no strong army units in the empire's provinces, including Anatolia, to stop the Seljuk conquests. Soon after, at a time when the country was facing serious internal and external problems, Eudokia married Romanos Diogenes. The new emperor wanted to make some reforms in the government, so he moved to the Anatolian side and began preparing the army to stop the Seljuk conquests in Anatolia. Finally, on August 26, 1071, he fought a battle at Manzikert, but was defeated and captured by Sultan Alp Arslan. Thus, his rule also came to an end. In the following years, because of continued Seljuk conquests, Byzantine control, especially in Anatolia, would continue to collapse. At a time when the Islamic world in the Middle East was shaken by especially sectarian and power struggles, we see that the first of the great Crusader movements, the First Crusade, began here. Toward the end of the 11th century in Western Europe, especially under the leadership of the Vatican Church, the idea had formed that it was long past time to take action to save Jerusalem, the city where Jesus was born, from the Muslims. This was seen as unavoidable for the Christian world of Europe and had become a necessity to carry out. The main reason for this great movement, called the Crusades, was religious. However, many studies have shown that other important reasons also played a role. These included Islam becoming a universal religion in opposition to Christianity and expanding its borders both eastward and westward. The Seljuks taking over Anatolia, parts of Syria, and Palestine, previously under Byzantine control, after the Battle of Manzikert, and founding states in these lands. Chagri Bey founding a beylik in Izmir, building a strong navy, and working with the Pechenegs, who seriously threatened Byzantium from the Balkans. And finally, the major economic crisis in Western Europe after the migration of tribes. This topic will be explained further during the time of Sultan Berkyaruk. The name of the Ayyubid dynasty, which ruled in Egypt, Syria, and Yemen, comes from the famous ruler Saladin's father, Najm al-Din Ayyub bin Shadi. However, the real founder of this dynasty was Saladin himself. The Ayyubids, under the leadership of Najm al-Din Ayyub, left Duzjan, south of Erivan, and came to Iraq, entering the service of the Seljuks. They were given the city of Tikrit as a land grant. Later, the Ayyubids joined the service of the Atabeg of Mosul, Imad al-Din Zengi. Zengi soon appointed Ayyub as governor of Baalbek. After Zengi's death, Ayyub entered the service of Damascus Atabeg Unur, and his brother Asad al-Din Shirkuh joined Zengi's son, Atabeg Nur al-Din Mahmud. However, after the capture of Damascus, Ayyub and his sons also joined the service of Nur al-Din. Nur al-Din Mahmud decided to take over Egypt, where the Shiite Fatimid rule had become very weak, and the country was in great disorder, in order to become stronger against the Crusaders. Soon after, when the dismissed vizier Shawar asked for his help, Nur al-Din sent his commander Shirkuh with a strong army, including Saladin, to Egypt. Shirkuh defeated the Fatimid forces and captured Cairo, quickly taking control over Egypt. As a result, the Fatimid Caliph al-Adid appointed him as vizier. However, Shirkuh died not long after. Soon after Shirkuh's death, Saladin was made commander of the army by Nur al-Din and also appointed vizier by Caliph al-Adid. Thus, the Fatimid Caliphate came completely under the control of Nur al-Din Mahmud. However, Saladin Ayyubi succeeded in becoming the sole ruler of Egypt by defeating the local Black and Armenian forces that rose against him, using his main army made up of Oghuz Turks. He also neutralized the Crusaders who had surrounded Damietta. After these successes, following Nur al-Din's order, Saladin ended the Shiite Fatimid Caliphate and removed the Shiite sermon, khutbah, across the country. Instead, he declared the Sunni sermon in the name of the Abbasid Caliphate. At this time, the last Fatimid Caliph was al-Adid. Thus, the Shiite Fatimid Caliphate came to an end. Because of these successes, Saladin began to aim at founding an independent state in Egypt. As a result, his relationship with Nur al-Din started to weaken. However, he did not dare to rebel or declare independence against Nur al-Din in any way. Meanwhile, Saladin sent his brother Turan Shah with some troops and saved Yemen from the Kharijites. Also, the forces he sent to North Africa managed to conquer most of Libya. Around this time, Nur al-Din Mahmud, to whom Saladin was subject, died in Damascus. Thus, Saladin became free and gained independence. Soon after, through the campaigns he organized, he took control of Syria, Palestine, southeastern Anatolia, and northern Iraq. After these successes, Saladin gathered all Islamic forces and started a campaign against the Crusaders. As is known, on July 3, 1187, at the Battle of Hattin, he gave a heavy defeat to the Crusaders and peacefully took Jerusalem, ending the Crusader kingdom there. Because of this event, the Christian world organized the Third Crusade. After Saladin's death, his sons took control. Al-Aziz ruled Egypt, Al-Afdal ruled Damascus, and Az-Zahir ruled Aleppo. Each became ruler of a branch of the Ayyubids. His brother Al-Adil ruled northern Arabia and Al-Jazira. But later, Al-Adil took advantage of the power struggles among his nephews, neutralized them, and took control of nearly all the lands of his brother Saladin. However, he divided the land among his sons while they remained under his authority. Aleppo stayed under the rule of Saladin's descendants. The unity of the Ayyubid family was largely maintained during the time of Al-Adil and his son Al-Kamil. But Saladin's active political style slowly faded during this period, and the Ayyubids generally tried to stay at peace with the Crusaders. One of the reasons for this peaceful policy was that the Ayyubid rulers of Al-Jazira were especially under the pressure and threat of the Seljuk state of Turkey. As a result of this soft policy, Al-Kamil did not hesitate to give Jerusalem and its surroundings to the German Emperor Frederick II through the Treaty of Jaffa, thus gaining the emperor's support against his enemies. After Al-Kamil's death, the Ayyubids fell into serious weakness due to internal conflicts. However, they gained a clear superiority over the Crusaders. But soon after the death of al-Malik al-Salih Najm al-Din Ayyub, the rule of the state in Egypt passed into the hands of the Turkish Bahri Mamluks. Later, the Ayyubids of Al-Jazira, Aleppo, and Damascus were either destroyed or made dependent by the Mongols. The Ayyubids of Diyarbakir were ended by the Ak Koyunlu, and the Ayyubids of Yemen were ended by the Turkish Rasulids. One of the great Turkish states of the 13th century Middle East was the Mamluk state. Mamluk means slave soldier or paid soldier. The Mamluks ruled in two dynasties, Bahri and Burji. The Bahri Mamluks got their name because their barracks were on Rada Island in the Nile River. The Burji Mamluks were called this because they were placed in the towers, Burj, of the citadel of Cairo. After the Ayyubid state disappeared from history, the first ruler of the Turkish Mamluk state founded in Egypt was Izz al-Din Aybak al-Turkumani. Aybak, after removing those who opposed his rule, also defeated and eliminated the Ayyubids of Syria, who supposedly wanted to end the Mamluk state. After this success, with the initiative of the Abbasid Caliph al-Mustasim, Aybak made peace and formed an alliance with the Ayyubids of Syria, his former enemies, against the Mongols advancing toward Iraq, thus uniting the Islamic Near East. Despite all these successes, Aybak could not escape being killed by the assassins of his wife, Shajar al-Dur. After Aybak was eliminated, the leading emirs of the state declared Aybak's son Nur al-Din Ali as ruler. However, power struggles began among these emirs. Especially the Bahri emirs in Syria attacked Egypt twice to take control of the government, but they failed. On the other hand, as the Mongols invaded Iraq and advanced into Syria, the leading emirs of the state gathered, and according to the decision they made, they removed Nur al-Din Ali from the throne and declared Saif al-Din Qutuz as ruler. At that time, the Mongols had invaded and occupied Syria. All the leading emirs, commanders, and people expected the new ruler to stop the Mongol invasion. Facing this great danger, Qutuz did not lose hope or courage. After gaining full support and help from the Bahri Mamluks in Syria, who had been angry with Egypt, he left Cairo with a strong army and moved against the Mongols. As is known, near the village of Ain Jalut, he fought a very fierce battle against the Mongols and gave them a heavy and clear defeat. For the first time, the Mongol army was broken and forced to flee. As a result of this great historic victory, the Mongols were prevented from invading, occupying, and settling in the Islamic countries of the Near East. However, on his way back to Cairo after the victory, Qutuz was killed by Baybars and his companions, who had become his rivals, with the cooperation of the leading Bahri emirs. A few days after this event, the Bahri emirs gathered and declared Baybars as the Mamluk ruler with the title al-Malik al-Zahir and placed him on the throne. Without wasting any time, Baybars immediately took action. After suppressing some internal rebellions and ensuring peace and order in the country, he also achieved successes abroad against the Mongols and Crusaders. Here is what happened. Baybars defeated the Mongols, who attacked Syria whenever they had the chance and sometimes cooperated with the Crusaders by sending an army against them. He also personally led his army and defeated the forces of Hulagu's son Abaka, who had replaced his father and whose troops had been reinforced by the Crusaders, first at Haran and later at Bayre. After these successful military campaigns, Baybars, by cooperating with some Seljuk and especially Karamanid emirs, organized a campaign to Anatolia to drive the Mongols out of the region. He defeated the Mongols with a heavy and decisive loss in the Elbistan plain and almost destroyed them. In the first and second years of his reign, Baybars attacked and besieged Antioch twice, which was ruled by Bohemond VI, who had allied with the Mongols, but he could not capture the city. Meanwhile, Baybars re-established the Abbasid Caliphate in Egypt, which had been destroyed by the Mongols, and also formed an alliance and cooperation with the Golden Horde state against the Mongols. Thus, becoming stronger against both the Mongols and Crusaders, Baybars moved with his army and captured the cities of Caesarea, Jaffa, Arsuf, Arlis, Safed, and Rasoule one by one. He also besieged Acre heavily, but could not take it. Later, he sent an army under the command of Kalawun against the Armenians of Chukurova, Cilicia, who had previously cooperated with the Mongols and encouraged them to invade and occupy Syria. This army defeated the Armenians and their allies near Derbasak and also plundered and destroyed Mises, Kozan, Adana, and Tarsus. After this successful campaign, Baybars took advantage of the internal conflicts among the Crusaders and raided and destroyed the cities of Tiberias, Acre, and Jaffa. Then, he captured the major Crusader center Antioch after a successful siege. Thus, the Principality of Antioch, which the Crusaders had founded in 1097, came to an end. Later, Baybars organized an unsuccessful naval expedition to Cyprus. 1 year later, he moved against the Crusader county of Tripoli and captured some castles. As a result of his political, military, and economic efforts both inside and outside the country, Baybars succeeded in establishing a strong foundation for the state's administration. During his reign, the country's borders extended to Cyrenaica in the west, Nubia and Massawa in the south, and the Taurus Mountains in the north. This great Turkish ruler passed away on June 20th, 1277. After Baybars, 21 sultans from the Bari Mamluk branch ruled, and this branch lasted for 132 years, until 1382. Among the rulers after Baybars, the reigns of al-Malik al-Mansur, Saif al-Din Qalawun, and his son al-Malik al-Nasir Muhammad are important in Mamluk history in terms of both internal and external events. Between 1382 and 1517, the Burji Mamluk sultans held power. However, they were not as talented and powerful as the sultans from the Bari branch. During the time of the Burji Mamluks, the Middle East witnessed the invasion of Timur, and the rule of the Ak Koyunlu, and especially the Ottoman Empire, began. In the end, the Burji Mamluks were brought to an end by the Ottoman Sultan Selim I. As stated by many sources, the Seljuks belonged to the Kunuk tribe of the Oghuz Turks. Dukak, who is known as the ancestor of the Seljuks, and was given the title Iron-Bowed among the Oghuz because of his great strength, held an important political and military position in the Oghuz Yabgu state, just below the Yabgu himself. For this reason, the Oghuz Yabgu would consult Dukak to solve important internal and external problems of the state. In light of research, it has been understood that Dukak, the leader of the large and influential Kunuk tribe within the Oghuz Yabgu state, was not a tent maker or from a noble Khan or Kagan family, as some claims suggest. These do not match with historical facts. There is no reliable information in related sources or in research, especially in the writings of Ibn al-Adim, about Dukak's extended lineage. In some sources, and the studies based on them, it has been suggested that Dukak was subject to the Khazar Turks. However, research shows that this subjection could only have occurred before the year 922, during the period when the Khazars were very powerful, and it was only through the Oghuz Yabgu state. The disagreement between Dukak and the Oghuz Yabgu, who was a strong political and military leader, is told in sources in the form of a story that does not seem very realistic. According to the story, Dukak argued with the Yabgu, who wanted to launch a campaign against a Turkish group. This argument turned into a fight, but they later reconciled during a feast arranged with the help of the Oghuz Beys. After this event, Dukak's fame among the Oghuz increased. That is all we know about Dukak. His date of death is not known for certain, but it is estimated to have occurred between the years 875 and 885. After Dukak's death, Seljuk was appointed Subashi, commander of the army, by the Oghuz Yabgu at a young age, and he also became the leader of the Kunuk tribe. Trained by his father according to old Turkish traditions to be a skilled soldier and politician, Seljuk soon became very famous in the Yabgu state. However, as mentioned in related sources and research, one day Seljuk entered the Yabgu's palace and walked past the Hatun, queen, the children, and the other top officials, and sat down directly next to the Yabgu. This action was considered disrespectful by the state leaders, especially the Hatun. Because of this, and influenced by the state officials and the urging of his wife, the Yabgu began to see Seljuk as a rival and started preparing to eliminate him. Due to the seriousness of the situation, Seljuk was forced to leave the winter capital of the Yabgu state, Yengikent, along with his family members and a small group of Oghuz from the Kunuk tribe, and migrate to the summer capital of the state, Chend. Seljuk soon took control of the city of Chend, where the rule of the Yabgu state was already quite weak, and he established a small beylik, principality, there. This city and its surroundings were very close to the Islamic world, and Islam was spreading rapidly in this region. After a while, Seljuk held a meeting with the elders of the Kunuk tribe to discuss and evaluate the situation they were in. He told them, "We must accept Islam, which has become the dominant religion in the land where we have settled. Otherwise, we will not be able to grow and develop as a state, and will be condemned to live as a small and insignificant group." In this way, Seljuk showed how well he understood the political and social environment and proved himself to be a far-sighted leader. After long discussions, Seljuk sent a delegation to the governor of a city, whose name is not given in the sources but assumed to be either Chend or another city in Transoxiana, asking him to send a religious scholar to teach them about Islam. Thus, Seljuk and the Oghuz people with him abandoned the Gök Tanrı, sky god, religion, and accepted Islam. This event marks a very important turning point in both Seljuk history and the Islamic era of Turkish history. Seljuk went down in history as the first ruler of the Seljuk lineage to accept Islam. In fact, there are great similarities between the Gök Tanrı religion and Islam. After converting to Islam, Seljuk took the title Malik al-Ghazi, warrior king, and began a jihad against non-Muslims. In the city of Chend, he expelled the Yabgu state's tax collectors, saying, "Muslims do not pay taxes to non-Muslims." Later, he fought successful battles against non-Muslim Turks who attacked them. In one of these expeditions, his eldest son Mikhail was killed. In the following years, Mikhail's sons, Tugrul and Chagri Bey, who would later found the great Seljuk Empire, were carefully raised and trained by their grandfather Seljuk. After founding a beylik in Chend, Seljuk became a representative of political and military power in the region, especially during the conflicts between the Karakhanids and the Samanids. For this reason, Seljuk's beylik was officially recognized by the Samanids, who were in a difficult position against the Karakhanids. Soon after, the Samanid ruler Nuh asked Seljuk for military assistance against the Karakhanid ruler Bughra Khan. In response, Seljuk sent a supporting unit under the command of his eldest son Arslan. Thanks to this help, the Samanids defeated the Karakhanids. In return, they gave the Seljuks the Nur district, located between Bukhara and Samarkand, near the Karakhanid border, as a homeland. Thus, the Oghuz under Arslan came to Transoxiana and settled in the district of Nur. According to various studies, the reasons for the migration of the Oghuz, including the Seljuks, who were later called Turkmens after converting to Islam, towards the south and into Transoxiana were the pressure from the Kipchaks in the north, lack of land and pastures, conflicts with the non-Muslim Oghuz Yabgu state, the growing power of the Muslim Karakhanids, who were becoming dominant in the region. Seljuk did not migrate to Transoxiana, and after some time he died in Chend and was buried there. According to the sources, Seljuk had 4 sons: Mikhail, who died at a young age, and Arslan, Yusuf Yunal, and Musa Inanj. It is also claimed that he had a 5th son named Yunus. After Seljuk's death, following ancient Turkish tradition, his eldest son Arslan became the head of the Seljuk family and took the title of Yabgu. Again, according to tradition, after Arslan, Musa Inanj Bey held the title of Yabgu for a long time. Thus, Arslan Yabgu became the chief of the Seljuks. However, other members of the family were at the head of Oghuz clans loyal to them and were in a semi-independent position, loosely connected to Arslan Yabgu in a feudal sense. Therefore, the Oghuz people generally loyal to Tugrul and Chagri Bey were called Seljuks. Those under Arslan were called Yabgulular, and those under Yusuf Yinal were called Yinalilar. After the death of their grandfather Seljuk, Tugrul and Chagri Bey, as well as the Yinal family and Musa Inanj Bey, came to the region of the Nur district in Transoxiana. At that time, the great Karakhanid ruler Harun Bugra Khan captured Bukhara and ended the Samanid state. Thus, Arslan Yabgu, who had been an ally of the Samanids, was left alone against the Karakhanids. But shortly after, the last Samanid ruler, Ismail Muntasir, united with Arslan Yabgu and took action, retaking Bukhara from the Karakhanids and even defeating them near the Zarafshan bridge in the region of Samarkand. However, not long after, Muntasir was defeated again by the Karakhanid ruler Ilig Nasr Khan and had to leave Bukhara. Still continuing the struggle, Muntasir received new military support from Arslan Yabgu and again defeated Ilig Nasr Khan near Samarkand. However, during this time, Arslan Yabgu changed his political stance and allied with Ilig Nasr Khan, turning against Muntasir. As a result, Muntasir failed in his attempts to restore the Samanid state. After the Samanid state disappeared completely from the stage of history, although Arslan Yabgu continued cooperating with the Karakhanids, he was still waiting to see how events in Transoxiana would develop after the fall of the Samanids. On the other hand, Tugrul and Chagri Bey were attacked by Ilig Nasr Khan and were forced to enter the service of the Karakhanid ruler Bugra Khan. During this service, Bugra Khan had Tugrul Bey captured and imprisoned. In response, Chagri Bey immediately took action, defeated the forces sent by Bugra Khan, and captured some Karakhanid commanders. Because of this, Bugra Khan was forced to release Tugrul Bey. After this event, Tugrul and Chagri Bey returned to Transoxiana, with the Turkmens loyal to them. However, shortly after, upon the death of Ilig Nasr Khan, the Karakhanid prince Ali Tegin, who had been imprisoned by the Karakhanid ruler Arslan Khan, found an opportunity to escape and, with the support of Arslan Yabgu, seized Bukhara and succeeded in establishing an independent Karakhanid principality there. He also strengthened his position by marrying the daughter of his ally Arslan Yabgu. Thus, a new alliance front was formed against the Karakhanids and the Ghaznavids. After this event, Arslan Yabgu, and thus the Seljuks, began to gain greater political and military importance in Transoxiana. Although there are no clear records in the sources, it is understood from the course of events that there was not a close relationship between Arslan Yabgu, who was the head of the Seljuk family, and Tugrul and Chagri Bey. Rather, there was a coldness and tension. A definite proof of this is that Tugrul and Chagri Bey were not included in the alliance with Ali Tegin. Indeed, very soon, this tension within the Seljuk family increased further, and as a result, Ali Tegin took action against Tugrul and Chagri Bey, weakened them, and tried to force them to submit to him. It is hardly possible that Ali Tegin undertook this hostile move without the knowledge or approval of his ally Arslan Yabgu. Faced with serious and dangerous pressure and attacks from both Bughra Khan and Ali Tegin, Tugrul and Chagri Bey decided to search for a safer new homeland. To carry this out, Tugrul Bey and the Turkmens withdrew to the deserts, which were easier to defend, while Chagri Bey set out on an exploratory expedition to Anatolia, which was under Byzantine rule and where Turkish relatives who had once served the Abbasids had previously fought in military campaigns. Chagri Bey moved westward from Transoxiana toward Anatolia with 3,000 cavalry. In 1016, he passed through Khorasan, which was under Ghaznavid control, and was joined by Turkmens who had come there before him. Although the local governor Arslan Jazib tried to follow him, Chagri Bey passed through at lightning speed and entered the lands of Persian Iraq. Hearing of Chagri Bey's movement, Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, who was conducting campaigns in India at the time, became extremely angry at Arslan Jazib for failing to stop Chagri Bey and severely scolded him. Chagri Bey did not stay long in this area and crossed the eastern Anatolian borders through Azerbaijan, entering the Van Lake Basin. As the first to enter Anatolia, the Turkish cavalry, described especially in Armenian sources as armed with spears, bows, and arrows, wearing belts with long braided hair flying like the wind, defeated the forces sent by the Byzantine commander Sennacherib under a shower of arrows like rain. As a result, except for a few fortresses, most of the Van Lake Basin came under the control and supervision of the Turkish forces. In this region, where no Byzantine force could resist him anymore, Chagri Bey moved north towards the area of Nakhchivan, where the Georgians lived. Because the Byzantine commander of Georgian origin, Liparit, did not dare to fight, Chagri Bey easily took control of the entire area. He then marched to the Nig region, south of the city of Divin, and completely defeated the forces of the Byzantine commander of Bechni Fortress, Vashak Palavuni, who tried to resist. In fact, this commander was killed by Turkish soldiers while fleeing during the defeat. Thus, Chagri Bey not only raided the Van Lake Basin in the south, but also Nakhchivan and the Nig region. As a result, Chagri Bey, through this successful exploratory campaign aimed at finding future lands to settle, clearly proved that a Turkish force, numbering only 5,000 to 6,000 cavalry, even after reinforcements, and considered small even for that time, could not be stopped by the Byzantine forces in eastern Anatolia. Soon after, Chagri Bey skillfully escaped the pursuit of Arslan Jazib, who had received orders to follow him closely. He returned to Transoxiana through the route he had come from, via Azerbaijan and Khorasan, and reached his brother Tugrul Bey in 1021, informing him in detail about the exploratory expedition. He said, "We cannot fight the strong states here, namely the Karakhanids and Ghaznavids, but we can rule in Khorasan, Azerbaijan, and eastern Anatolia, because I found no force there capable of resisting us," encouraging him to move westward. After the fall of the Samanid state, Ali Tegin, who had established a Karakhanid principality in Bukhara and had a large group of Turkmens, made an alliance with Arslan Yabgu. Thus, Ali Tegin succeeded in becoming the representative of a third political and military power against the Karakhanids and Ghaznavids, and began expanding his areas of control in Transoxiana. Thereupon, the Ghaznavids, who also ruled over Khwarezm, and the Karakhanids, who did not want to see any rivals in Transoxiana, immediately took action. The great Karakhanid ruler Yusuf Qadir Khan and the Ghaznavid Sultan Mahmud held a meeting near Samarkand. During the discussions between the two rulers, referred to in the sources as dealing with the issues of Iran and Turan, the following decisions were made. Ali Tegin's principality in Transoxiana would be ended, and Yusuf Qadir Khan's son, Yagma Tegin, would be placed in charge. All the Turkmens under Arslan Yabgu, who was becoming an increasing threat to both the Karakhanids and Ghaznavids, would be transferred from Transoxiana to Khorasan. The Amu Darya River would be the border between the two states. Both rulers would strengthen the treaty through a marriage alliance. Sultan Mahmud immediately began to implement these agreed measures. He sent an envoy to Arslan Yabgu, who had withdrawn to the desert with Ali Tegin to protect himself from a possible surprise attack by either ruler, with the following message: "We often go on campaigns to India for jihad. Many volunteers from various Islamic lands join us in these expeditions. But you, as Muslims, why do you not participate in these jihads? I invite you to my court to discuss all these matters and to establish friendship. If you come, I will grant you honors and titles suitable to your status." Knowing he could not succeed against the two powerful states, Arslan Yabgu went to meet Sultan Mahmud in Samarkand with some of his close companions. During a speech at the banquet held in his honor, when the Sultan asked, "If I need military help, how many cavalry can you send me?" Arslan Yabgu, somewhat under the influence of drink, responded, "If I send this arrow to my tribe, 10,000 cavalry. If I send this bow to my people, 30,000 cavalry. If I send this arrow to Mount Balkan, 100,000 cavalry. If I send this arrow with 3 bows, also 100,000 cavalry. And finally, if I send this arrow to Turkestan, 200,000 cavalry will come." Astonished by these words, Sultan Mahmud, who had in fact invited Arslan Yabgu with a trick, had him, his son Kutalmish, and some of his close men arrested. He sent them to be imprisoned in the Kalinjar fortress, located on a mountain pass leading to Kashmir. After eliminating Arslan Yabgu in this way, Sultan Mahmud launched attacks on the now leaderless Turkmens, had them widely plundered, and shortly afterward brought about 10 to 15,000 of them, roughly 4,000 tents, to Khorasan, despite the opposition of Khorasan governor Arslan Jazib. He settled them in Nesa, Baward, and Farava. These Turkmens, known in the sources as the Balkan and Iraq Turkmens, were often seen on the move, especially under leaders like Kizil, Yamur, Goktash, Boa, and Mansur, due to the imprisonment of their chief Arslan Yabgu. Very soon, due to the oppressive behavior of Ghaznavid tax collectors, these Turkmens, together with others who had joined them, began looting activities in the areas where they had settled. In response, Sultan Mahmud first sent Khorasan governor Arslan Jazib against them, and later took action himself, punishing them severely. As a result, some of the Turkmens fled to the Balkan Mountains and Diastan under the leadership of various beys, while others moved west and launched raids into regions extending as far as Azerbaijan and eastern Anatolia. Especially after Arslan Yabgu sent an arrow from the Kalinjar prison, these Turkmens increased their attacks against the Ghaznavids. They also made attempts to rescue their leader from Kalinjar prison, but they were not successful. However, Kutalmish managed to escape captivity and reached the tribe of the Turkmens loyal to his father. A while later, Arslan Yabgu died in this prison, where he had remained for 7 years. After the imprisonment and death of Arslan Yabgu, the new leaders of the Seljuk family, and therefore of the Turkmens, became the brothers Tugrul and Chagri Bey. The leadership of the family, under the title of Yabgu, was given to the elder and calm-natured Musa Inanj Bey. Sultan Mahmud, who had successfully removed Arslan Yabgu, now attempted to apply the same policy to Tugrul and Chagri Bey. He sent them an envoy with an offer to give them land, but they refused this offer, knowing his intentions. Meanwhile, Ali Tegin returned to Bukhara and took over the leadership of the Karakhanid Principality. This time, he sent a message to Tugrul and Chagri Bey, proposing an alliance against their common enemies, the Karakhanids and Ghaznavids. However, due to his previous hostile behavior toward them, Tugrul and Chagri Bey no longer trusted him and rejected his offer. Ali Tegin then tried to divide the Seljuk family and make them submit to him. He sent an envoy and valuable gifts to Ibrahim Yunal, proposing to grant him the title of Seljuk Yabgu, but he did not succeed. As a result, he launched a raid against the Seljuks with an army led by Alp Kara. In the battles that followed, many Seljuk beys and soldiers, including Ibrahim Yunal, were killed. Despite this, the Seljuks quickly regrouped and marched with an army led by Tugrul, Chagri, and Musa Yabgu. They considered the birth of Alp Arslan, who would later become the second Seljuk Sultan, as a sign of good fortune, and defeated the army of the Bukhara-Karakhanid Principality led by Alp Kara. They succeeded in killing Alp Kara and many Karakhanid emirs. However, due to Ali Tegin's continued attacks, the Seljuks were forced to migrate to Khwarezm. There, they settled in the regions of Shurahan and Darhan, which were given to them as homeland by Al-Tuntash, the Ghaznavid governor of Khwarezm. Meanwhile, around this time, Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni died. His son Mas'ud, with the support of Ali Tegin, won the struggle for the throne and became the new Ghaznavid Sultan. Still, Mas'ud continued to follow his father's policies. He sent the governor of Khwarezm, Al-Tuntash, on a campaign against Ali Tegin in Bukhara. However, shortly after the battle at Debusia, Al-Tuntash died. Harun, who was appointed as the new governor of Khwarezm, declared his independence and started a rebellion against the Ghaznavids. In order to strengthen his position, he made an alliance not only with Ali Tegin, but also with the Seljuks to gain their help and support. In return, he gave the Seljuks the regions of Ribat-i-Mash and Shurahan in Khwarezm as their homeland. Thus, a triple alliance was formed against the Ghaznavids. This event shows that the Seljuks once again became a political and military power in the region. It is understood that the Seljuks, who had settled in Khwarezm, were closely watched by Sha Malik from the Baranli tribe of the Oghuz, who is mentioned in the sources as a very old enemy of the Seljuks and is likely the son of the last Oghuz Yabgu. In October 1034, during the Eid al-Adha holiday, Sha Malik suddenly attacked the Seljuks. He killed 8,000 of them, captured many women, children, and soldiers, and seized a lot of goods before returning to Jand. Truly believing that they were in a safer place, the Seljuks were caught in great surprise and panic. They thought they had been betrayed by Ali Tegin or Harun and immediately crossed the Amu Darya River, settling in Ribat-i-Nemak. Right after the incident, Harun, not wanting to lose his allies, the Seljuks, comforted them and persuaded them to return to their lands in Khwarezm by giving them a great amount of goods and money. Also, he met Sha Malik on a boat on the Amu Darya and tried to mediate peace between him and the Seljuks, but he failed. When Sha Malik wanted to attack the Seljuks again, he was forced to retreat to Jand in the face of Harun's large army of 30,000 soldiers. A short while after this, Ali Tegin died. Thus, Harun, who was still struggling with the Ghaznavids, lost a very important ally. Seeing this as an opportunity, Ghaznavid Sultan Mas'ud had Harun assassinated by a secret agent he sent. After these two important events, the Seljuks, now under threat from both Ali Tegin's sons and the Ghaznavids, entered a new and dangerous period. Seeing that they were in a very critical and difficult situation in their homeland in Khwarezm, the Seljuks, under the leadership of Tugrul, Chagri, and Musa Ain Jalut, crossed the Amu Darya without the permission of the Ghaznavids in May 1035. They came to Khorasan and settled in the regions of Merv, Serax, and Farava. Some groups of Turkmens who had come to these areas earlier also joined them, increasing their numbers even more. The Seljuk leaders immediately sent a letter to Suri, the head of the Khorasan administration under the Ghaznavids. In it, they apologized and explained, "We are homeless and in a desperate situation, so we had to come to Khorasan. In exchange for military service, we ask you to kindly request Sultan Mas'ud to allow us to settle in the areas we currently occupy." Sultan Mas'ud, who was immediately informed of the situation, remembered how his father Sultan Mahmud had made a serious mistake in the past by moving Arslan Yabgu's Oghuz people to Khorasan and the problems they had caused in the country. Because of this, he did not accept the Seljuks' request. Although the members of the Ghaznavid State Council argued that it would not be right to turn the Seljuks, who currently had 10,000 mounted warriors, into enemies, the Sultan did not change his decision and decided to organize a military campaign against the Seljuks. He immediately put this plan into action. For this purpose, the large Ghaznavid army sent against the Seljuks under the command of the Hajib Beg Togdi initially defeated the Seljuks. But in the main battle that took place in the region of Nesa, especially thanks to Chagri Bey's great military skills, the Ghaznavid army was completely defeated. Commander Begtogdi and his scattered forces barely managed to escape to Nishapur. After this victory, the Seljuks captured a great amount of gold, valuable goods, weapons, clothing, and horses as spoils. This victory against the Ghaznavids was considered a very important and historic achievement on the Seljuks' path to founding a state. As a result, Sultan Mas'ud sent a royal decree announcing, "Nesa is given to Tugrul Bey, Dihistan to Chagri Bey, and Farava to Musa Ain Jalut as land grants with the title of Dihkan." He also sent a cap, a saddled horse, a golden belt, and a banner. In return, the Seljuks would accept being under the authority of the Ghaznavids. Thus, with this agreement, the Sultan had to grant autonomy to the Seljuks in Khorasan and recognize them as a political and military power. After the victory of 1035, the Seljuks, who were continuously joined by migrating Oghuz from Turkestan, became stronger and more dangerous for the Ghaznavids. Despite the agreement, both sides did not trust each other, especially the Seljuks, whose numbers were constantly growing and who needed new lands, requested more territory like Merv, Serax, Bavard, and surrounding areas. They also launched raids as far as Sistan and tried to establish political relations with Ismail, who became Khwarezm Shah after Harun, and with the Karakhanid ruler Bura Khan. Watching all these activities of the Seljuks closely, Sultan Mas'ud decided to drive them out of Khorasan with a decisive blow. For this purpose, he sent a Ghaznavid army of 15,000 soldiers under the command of Hajib Subashi to Khorasan, and a second army to Herat. However, because he failed to understand the political situation in the region, he did not give much importance to the Seljuks and went on a campaign to India. When Subashi marched from Nishapur to Serax, the Seljuks, filled with fear and anxiety, sent all their families and supplies to the Merv Desert and took battle positions in the Seracs region against the Ghaznavid army. Very soon, clashes began between the forces of both sides. The Seljuks, who had fewer troops compared to the Ghaznavids, attacked and retreated according to steppe warfare tactics, using their cavalry units to wear down the heavily equipped Ghaznavid army. However, very soon, at Tel Hab, in the Seracs region in late May 1038, after a whole day of intense fighting between the two sides, the Ghaznavid army was once again completely defeated, especially due to Chagri Bey's military skill and masterful maneuvers. Subashi, along with other Ghaznavid commanders and soldiers, fled to Herat. As a result of this second victory against the Ghaznavids, the Seljuks now gained independence. According to the old Turkish state tradition, Tugrul Bey became the legal head of the state and took control of Nishapur, Chagri Bey took Merv, and Musa Ain Jalut held Seracs. Thus, the Ghaznavid rule in Khorasan came to an end, and Seljuk rule began. After the battle, Ibrahim Yunal entered Nishapur with a force of 200 horsemen and took control of the city on behalf of Tugrul Bey, where a sermon was delivered in his name with the title Sultan al-Muazzam. Very soon, Tugrul Bey arrived in Nishapur with 3,000 cavalry, holding a bow on his arm and 3 arrows on his belt. He was welcomed by the city's notables with a grand ceremony and sat on the throne of Ghaznavid Sultan Masud in a glorious event. He immediately established a Mazalim court and personally listened to the complaints of the people. Soon after, he began organizing the Seljuk state administration and made some appointments for this purpose. In Merv, a sermon was also delivered in the name of Chagri Bey, with the title Malik al-Muluk. Shortly afterward, the Abbasid Caliph al-Qaim bi Amrillah sent an envoy to Tugrul Bey in Nishapur. Thus, the Abbasid Caliphate officially recognized Seljuk rule in Khorasan. After these two important victories mentioned earlier, the Ghaznavids' political and military position in the region was seriously shaken. Taking advantage of this, the Karakhanid prince Ali Tegin carried out some raids into Ghaznavid territory. To strengthen his shaken position, Sultan Masud formed an alliance with Chendmiri Sha Malik against the Seljuks and the rebel Khwarezm Shah Ismail, offering Khwarezm in return. After this political move, he mobilized an army of 50,000 cavalry and infantry, including many war elephants, described in the sources as an army that even all of Turkestan could not resist. He first marched to Balkh, then proceeded toward Seracs. At that time, Chagri Bey was busy conquering Talakan, Faryab, Shuburkan, and surrounding areas. Upon hearing of the Sultan's campaign, Chagri Bey came to Seracs, followed by Tugrul Bey and Musa Ain Yabgu. They gathered in Seracs and immediately began preparing for war against the advancing Sultan. However, some Seljuk commanders believed that they could not stand against the very large and strong Ghaznavid army, so they suggested retreating to Rey, Gorgan, and the Jibal regions. Chagri Bey opposed this idea, saying that Khorasan must never be abandoned. Succeeding in other new lands would be very difficult, and they could win a third victory even against the heavy Ghaznavid army. His idea was accepted by the other Seljuk commanders. Soon after, the Seljuk army, which had slightly more than 20,000 soldiers, clashed with the 50,000-strong Ghaznavid army near the Tel Hab region. The Seljuk forces could not hold their ground against the large Ghaznavid army and had to retreat into the nearby deserts. Meanwhile, Sultan Masud went to Nishapur. However, the Seljuks started launching attacks from the desert with their light and very mobile cavalry to wear down the Ghaznavid army, they especially destroyed and blocked water wells in the region. During this time, the Seljuk commanders accepted Sultan Masud's peace offer, which stated, "Nesa, Bavard, and Farava will be given to the Seljuks, while Nishapur, Seracs, and Merv will remain with the Ghaznavids." Thus, both sides gained time and opportunity to prepare for a decisive war. At the same time, large Oghuz groups coming from Turkestan joined the Seljuks upon invitation. In this way, the Seljuks became somewhat stronger against the Ghaznavids. Sultan Masud spent the winter in Nishapur and was determined to deliver a decisive blow to the Seljuks, either driving them out of Khorasan or making them submit. Very soon, he marched from Nishapur with an army of 100,000, the largest army of the time, toward Tus and Seracs. When the Seljuk commanders heard that the Sultan was moving with a very strong army, they gathered immediately to discuss the situation. Most commanders again suggested retreating to western Iran because of this serious and dangerous situation. But this idea was once more strongly rejected by Chagri Bey. His belief that the tired and heavy Ghaznavid army coming through the desert route could be defeated was accepted by the other Seljuk commanders this time. Soon, the Seljuk army moved out from Seracs, and their advance forces started attacking the Ghaznavid army, which was heading toward Merv. The main Seljuk army was pulling back toward the desert as part of a tactic. Meanwhile, some units from the 20,000-strong Seljuk army destroyed and closed all water wells along the path of the Ghaznavid army. Thus, their plan to leave the large Ghaznavid army without water was successfully carried out. On the other hand, the Ghaznavid army, which changed direction and marched toward the Dandanakan fortress near Merv to meet their water needs, was truly in a miserable state due to thirst and exhaustion. In addition, the increasing attacks of the Seljuk advance forces caused them heavy losses. When Sultan Masud saw that the water wells at Dandanakan had also been destroyed by the Seljuks, he fell into deep despair. Discipline in his army began to break down slowly, and disagreements started to arise between the Sultan and his commanders. Thus, having managed to weaken the Ghaznavid army before the battle even started, the Seljuk commanders decided to engage in a decisive field battle in front of Dandanakan fortress, and moved quickly. Between 22nd to 24th May 1040, a very fierce and almost life-or-death battle took place. The Ghaznavid army, which lacked unity, was hungry, thirsty, and tired, was completely defeated, especially due to Chagri Bey's brilliant tactics and attacks, as he had done successfully in previous battles, using his great military knowledge and skills. During the battle, some of the Turkmen units in the Ghaznavid army switched sides and joined the Seljuks. By May 24th, the large Ghaznavid army had completely disappeared from the battlefield. Sultan Masud barely escaped with his life with 100 cavalrymen. The other Ghaznavid commanders also left their army and fled. After the battle, the Seljuks captured the Ghaznavids' valuable treasure, weapons, and many goods. A large part of these spoils was distributed among the soldiers who had fought in the battle. After leaving the city of Jend and engaging in long and difficult struggles with the Karakhanids and Ghaznavids in the Islamic world, the Seljuks finally achieved the full independence they had longed for through the victory at Dandanakan. This victory had very important consequences for Turkish Islamic and world history. After founding a state in Khorasan, they began to represent the material power and authority of the entire Sunni Islamic world and took on the duty of protecting it against all internal and external threats. Right after the Battle of Dandanakan, Tugrul Bey was raised onto the throne of sovereignty in his tent on the battlefield and was declared and accepted by all Seljuk commanders as the Seljuk ruler of Khorasan. Because of this great favor and blessing, everyone bowed down in gratitude and prayed sincerely to Almighty God. Later, in the city of Merv, during the Great Assembly, Kurultai, attended by all Seljuk commanders and princes, a decision was made to announce this historic victory. In Tugrul Bey's name, letters of conquest were sent to the Abbasid caliph, the Karakhanid rulers and princes, and the local rulers in Iran. In particular, the letter sent to the Caliph al-Qaim bi Amrillah described in detail the unjust and unnecessary struggle initiated by Ghaznavid rulers Sultan Mahmud and Masud against the Seljuks and the sufferings and oppression they endured. It also stated that the Seljuks had always obeyed and remained loyal to the Caliph, treated the people with justice, and would carry out holy war, Gaza, against non-believers. At the beginning of this conquest letter, the ancient Turkish symbols of arrow and bow were included. Later, according to another decision that was made, the lands and countries planned to be conquered were divided among the leaders of the Seljuk family, as follows. Tugrul Bey would sit in the capital city Nishapur as the official and legal sultan and would take charge of the conquests of the western regions. Chagri Bey, as the prince and military commander, would reside in Merv as his center of administration and would conquer and rule the cities of Saras and Balkh, along with the lands between the Amu Darya and Ghazni. Musa Ain Yabgu would rule over the lands stretching from Bust and Isfizar to Sistan, with Herat as his capital. Additionally, due to the centralization policy of the state, some Seljuk princes were not granted autonomy. Instead, they were appointed as governors. Ibrahim Yunal, son of Yusuf Yunal, was appointed to Kuhistan. Kutalmish was assigned to Jurjan and Damgan. Kavurt Bey, son of Chagri Bey, was appointed to Kerman. Thus, the newly founded Seljuk state was divided according to this three-part administration system. Chagri Bey and Musa Inanj Bey, in their respective regions, could have sermons, khutbah, read, and coins minted in their names after the name of Sultan Tugrul. They could also have military bands play at the gates of their palaces 3 times a day and carry royal symbols like the chatar, ceremonial umbrella. However, both of them would remain completely subordinate to Sultan Tugrul in the capital Nishapur. While the Seljuk state organization was being structured, experienced statesmen from the Samanid and Gaznavid governments were utilized. In this context, Sultan Tugrul appointed Abul Qasim Ali as the first Seljuk vizier. Then he assigned Abul Fath, the ambassador of Isfahan's Emir Faramurz bin Kakuyid, to the vizierate, and later he made Amid al-Mulk Muhammad Kunduri his vizier. The Turkish origin Abdurrahman Alp Tegin was appointed as Hajib, chamberlain. Chagri Bey's vizier was Abu Ali Shadan, and Musa Inanj Bey's vizier was Abul Fazl. As seen in the previous section, after the Battle of Dandanakan, Tugrul Bey ascended the throne as the Sultan of the Seljuk Empire. Soon after, based on the decisions made at the Kurultai gathered in Merv and the determined plans of conquest, Sultan Tugrul, along with Chara and Musa Inanj Bey, went to their respective regions and began their conquests. As follows. After establishing the state administration in the capital Nishapur, Sultan Tugrul brought Gurgan and Tabaristan under Seljuk rule and turned the small local Ziyarid and Bavandid rulers in these areas into vassals of the Seljuk state. On the other hand, Chara Bey, who marched with a strong army, besieged Balkh, which was defended by the Ghaznavid governor Altuntak. Mevdud, the son of Sultan Masud, launched a counterattack to save the city, but he was defeated, and shortly after, the governor had to surrender the city to Chara Bey. Then, Chara Bey conquered one by one the cities and fortresses of Juzjan, Badghis, Kutalan, and other parts of Tokaristan. As for Musa Inanç Bey, he also marched with his army and captured Herat, settling there. Meanwhile, Ertaş, the brother of Ibrahim Yunal, conquered the province of Sistan and had the Friday sermon, khutbah, read in the name of Musa Inanç Bey. Upon this, Mevdud, who had ascended the Ghaznavid throne, launched a counterattack and managed to recapture Herat. As seen before, the relentless enemy of the Seljuks, Sendemiri Sha Malik, attacked Khwarezm with a large army, a region that had previously been granted to him by Sultan Masud through a decree, and heavily defeated the local governor Ismail at Asib. After this defeat, Ismail, along with his commanders and soldiers, left Khwarezm and took refuge with the Seljuks. Thus, Sha Malik easily took control of Khwarezm, which was left defenseless. Thereupon, Chagri Bey stopped fighting the Ghaznavids and, including Ismail and his forces who had sought refuge, marched immediately towards Khwarezm. Hearing this, Sha Malik had to withdraw from Khwarezm. However, he later returned and resumed his activities. Then Sultan Tugrul, returning from a western Iran campaign, marched with Chagri Bey and a large army to Khwarezm. Sha Malik, besieged in the city of Urgench, barely managed to escape the siege and sought refuge with the Ghaznavids. After his removal, Khwarezm was made a province under the control of the great Seljuk Empire. Later on, Sha Malik was captured in Makran by Ertaş and brought to Chagri Bey. He died in the prison where he was thrown. Thus, the Seljuks eliminated this old and persistent enemy. Returning from the Khwarezm campaign, Chagri Bey once again launched a campaign against the Ghaznavids and besieged Herat, previously taken from Musa Inanç Bey, but had to withdraw due to illness. Meanwhile, the Ghaznavid Sultan Mevdud launched a counterattack and achieved some local successes. However, he was soon decisively defeated in a battle against Ertaş. As a result, Musa Inanç Bey once again fully took control of Herat and Sistan. On the other hand, due to his illness and inability to join campaigns, Chagri Bey sent his young son, Prince Alp Arslan, on a campaign against the Ghaznavids. In this first campaign, Alp Arslan carried out a very successful military operation and defeated the Ghaznavid forces. He captured the cities of Termez, Kubadian, Vaksh, and Valwalij, and also managed to conquer the entire Tokaristan region. Chagri Bey entrusted the administration of all these conquered cities to his son Alp Arslan and appointed Abu Ali Shadan as his vizier. Later, Chagri Bey, to take back Khorasan from the Seljuks, made an alliance with the Karakhanid ruler Arslan Khan and the Buyid ruler Abu Kalijar, and began preparations for defense against the Ghaznavid Sultan Mevdud and his allies, who were preparing for an attack. However, due to Sultan Mevdud's death and the Buyid forces perishing in the desert, no serious battle took place. Meanwhile, the Seljuk forces sent by Chagri Bey defeated the Kipchak emir Hashka, an ally of the Ghaznavids who had attacked Khwarezm at Urgench. Later on, Arslan Khan marched to Termez, plundered and destroyed the city, and then crossed the Ceyhun River to take back Balkh and Tokaristan. In response, Chagri Bey sent his son Alparslan against him. But Arslan Khan did not dare to fight, and instead asked Chagri Bey for peace. After negotiations between both sides, a peace agreement was made with the condition that Arslan Khan would not attack Khorasan or other Seljuk lands. A while after this event, Chagri Bey sent his son Kavurt Bey to Kirman, which was under Buyid rule, to bring it into Seljuk territory. This region, where a Seljuk state would later be established, was brought under Seljuk control by around the year 1055. While the conflict with the Ghaznavids and the Seljuk conquests continued, Ibrahim Yunal, who was assigned to conquer the Dihistan region in western Iran, continued his conquests. The Turkmens loyal to Arslan Yabgu, under the leadership of beys like Göktaş and Ozolu Mansur, captured the city of Rey, which was under the control of Ala al-Dawla from the Kakuyid dynasty, who had betrayed them before the Battle of Dandanakan, and established a Turkmen principality there under Azizudevle Kızıl Bey. Then Ala al-Dawla, who fled to Isfahan, sought help from the Abbasid Caliph Qaim bi Emrillah, the spiritual head of the Sunni Islamic world. At the request of the Caliph, Sultan Tugrul assigned Ibrahim Yunal, who was then in charge of Dihistan, to bring the Turkmens under control. After receiving the order, Ibrahim Yunal captured the cities of Hamadan, Jibal, and Rey. The Turkmens in the region then moved westward. Soon, Sultan Tugrul arrived in Rey, where he was welcomed with a grand and magnificent ceremony by Ibrahim Yunal. Sultan Tugrul ordered the immediate restoration of the city, and, according to the Seljuk conquest plans, moved the capital of the state from Nishapur to Rey to better manage the planned western conquests. He demolished the old palace of the former rulers and had a new one built for himself. He also had a mosque and a madrasa constructed in the city. The Sultan also minted coins in his name here. After making Rey the capital of the Seljuk state, Sultan Tugrul marched to Kazvin, governed by Emir Merdovich, to continue the conquests and expand the Seljuk borders. However, Merdovich, unable to resist, agreed to remain as ruler under Seljuk vassalage by paying an annual tax of 80,000 gold coins. Later, Sultan Tugrul allowed Feramurz bin Ala al-Dawla, the emir of Isfahan, to continue ruling under the condition of paying annual tribute to the Seljuks. However, he ended the rule of Emir Gershasp of Hamadan and Emir Kamyar of Dihistan, who refused to pay tribute and accept Seljuk vassalage, and replaced them with others. After this campaign, Sultan Tugrul returned to the capital, Rey, and appointed Ibrahim Yunal, Kutalmush, and Chagri Bey's son Kavurt to complete the conquest of the rest of Iran outside the eastern regions. These Seljuk princes quickly took action and, within a few years, captured cities and fortresses such as Shahrizur, Hanikin, Hulwan, Dinever, Karmasin, Jurjan, Damgan, Kumis, Shiraz, Istakhr, which were under the rule of Buyid emirs and princes, bringing them into the Seljuk state. At the same time, Prince Alp Arslan also set out from Merv and managed to conquer a large part of Iran's Fars province, which was under Buyid control. Thus, during the reign of Sultan Tugrul, the Buyid rule in Iran was completely ended. Before the Seljuk state was founded in Khorasan, after Chagri Bey's expedition to eastern Anatolia to find a homeland, the Turkmens, who were later called Balkan and Iraq Turkmens, in the sources were moved and settled in Khorasan. This happened after their leader, Arslan Yabgu, was captured by trickery by the Ghaznavid ruler Mahmud and imprisoned in the Kalinkar castle in India. These Turkmens joined the other Turkmens who had come to this region during the Samanid period. After defeating the Ghaznavid governor of Tus, Arslan Kazib, who did not leave them in peace, Sultan Mahmud personally acted against them, gave them a heavy defeat, and had many of them killed. Some of these groups escaped to the mountains and deserts, which were easier to defend. Another group of about 2,000 tents went to Azerbaijan, entered the service of the local ruler Vesudan, and began raids into Anatolia with him. Mesut, the son of Sultan Mahmud and the governor of Iraq-i-Ajam, Persian Iraq, took the other Turkmens in Khorasan into his service. When his father died and Mesut became the Ghaznavid Sultan, he used these Turkmens a lot. However, after a while, the Ghaznavid governor of Rey, Tashfarash, had one of the important Turkmen leaders, Yamur Bey, killed. Because of this, more than 10,000 Turkmens rose up against the Ghaznavids under the leadership of beys like Göktaş and Ozolu Mansur. They defeated all the Ghaznavid commanders sent against them, especially Taşferaş. Later, while some of them stayed in Iraq-i-Ajam, a larger group came to Azerbaijan in 1036 and joined their relatives there. Some of these Turkmen groups moved to the east and south, but the main groups who stayed in Azerbaijan crossed the Aras River and came to the region of Aran. There, they joined with the ruler Fadlun and his son Ebul Esvar and made raids into areas in eastern Anatolia where some Armenian groups lived. Also, these Turkmens joined the war against the Byzantine commander Bagrat II when he attacked Tbilisi, which was in Muslim hands, and forced him to retreat. In addition to this, the Turkmens in Urmia, under the command of Ebul Heyka Hezbani, made raids into the Lake Van region. They defeated the forces under the Byzantine general Hatzik, and Hatzik was killed in this battle. Another group of Turkmens operating in the regions of Jazira and Mosul turned north in 1042 and attacked the Besni castle near the Aras River. But they could not capture the castle because of the intervention of Gajik, the Byzantine governor of Ani. However, they raided the Armenian areas, and especially the regions along the branches of the Murat and Tigris rivers, capturing many people and taking a lot of booty. The Turkmens, who entered the regions of Azerbaijan and eastern Anatolia under the order of Seljuk Sultan Tugrul, often joined raids against Byzantium with Seljuk vassal emirs in those areas. As we saw in the previous part, the Turkmens who came to Azerbaijan and cooperated with the local ruler Vesudan to attack Byzantium entered into a war with him after he killed about 30 of their chiefs, but they were not successful. Because of this, these Turkmens had to leave Azerbaijan and went to Urmia. There, together with their fellow Turkmens, they made successful raids in the Hakkari region. However, when they thought Sultan Tugrul's brother, Ibrahim Yunal, was coming after them, but in reality, he had reached the city of Rey to lead western conquests. Some other large Turkmen groups going to Azerbaijan joined them and moved southwest. Now very crowded, this group of Turkmens passed the high and steep mountains near the Bhutan River and reached the mountainous areas around the Erzin and Batman rivers, where they made raids and looted. One part of this large group, under the command of beys named Anasolu and Boa, moved to the areas between Diyarbakir, Silvan, Erzen, and Mardin, and took control of them. Another part went to the Cizre region and raided there. The governor of Cizre, Suleiman of the Marwanid dynasty, sent a messenger to the Turkmen leader Ozolu Mansur, who was staying in the area, and suggested, "Spend the winter here, and in spring go to Syria with the other Turkmens." Mansur Bey accepted this offer, but during the feast organized by Suleiman, he was arrested and imprisoned. Because of this, the Turkmens under Mansur's command scattered. A large group of them moved towards Mosul. Then, the emir of Mosul, Karvash of the Ukaylid dynasty, took action. He also got help and support from the Marwanid emir Nasr al-Dawla Ahmad and attacked the Turkmens. In the battle that took place in 1042, the allies were heavily defeated, and the Turkmens looted the Sinkar and Nusaybin areas. They also tried to besiege Cizre, but failed. Later, as the Turkmens spread into Diyarbakir and nearby areas, the emir of that region, Nasr al-Dawla Ahmad, brought the imprisoned Mansur Bey from Cizre to Silvan. He also sent messengers to other Turkmen leaders in the area, saying, "I will release Mansur Bey. If you leave my lands, I will give you much wealth and money." When they accepted this offer, Mansur Bey was freed and reunited with his people. However, because the amount of money and goods given was small, the Turkmens moved again and raided Nusaybin, Sinkar, and the Hapur areas. On the other hand, another group of Turkmens marched towards Mosul in 1043, defeated the city's ruler Karvash, captured Mosul, and raided the surrounding areas. Because of their strong loyalty ties, in the places they captured, they began to have sermons, khutbas, read in the name of the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad and the Seljuk Sultan. Because of these Turkmen activities directed especially at Muslim lands, the Abbasid Caliph, the ruler of the Iraq Buyid's Jalal al-Dawla, the Mosul Emir Karvash, and the Diyarbakir Emir Nasr al-Dawla all complained to Tugrul Bey, who was then in the Seljuk capital of Nishapur. They asked him to stop these raids. Tugrul Bey agreed with them and comforted them by taking their complaints seriously. The Sultan told the Marwanid Emir, who was a Seljuk vassal, "I heard that some groups from my servants entered your lands and made raids. You are our frontier emir. You should give them money, goods, the things they want. In this way, you can use them in the fight against Byzantium." He also promised him that the Turkmens will leave Diyarbakir and its surrounding areas. In fact, Tugrul Bey, when the Turkmens were still in Azerbaijan, had sent messengers to their leading beys and asked them to come to his presence. But they kept the messenger for a while and then sent him back with this message: "You want to gather all of us together and arrest us for our actions. Because of this, we are afraid and do not want to come to you. If you force us to come, we will not agree and will escape to Anatolia and Syria to save ourselves." On the other hand, some of the Turkmens who had captured Mosul were constantly expanding their territory. Because of this, the emir of Mosul, Karvash, got great help from nearby Arab emirs. Then in 1044, with the help of Boa and Anasolu Beys, who were in the Diyarbakir region, Karvash gave a heavy defeat to the Turkmens. So the Turkmens had to leave Mosul and went to Diyarbakir, where their other fellow Turkmens were. When Sultan Tugrul, who was in Rey near Tehran, which he had made the capital of the state, heard about this event, he again sent messengers to the Turkmens. He told them, "Do not raid Muslim lands. Go back to Azerbaijan and settle there for winter and summer. Then join the Seljuk emirs and commanders in raids against Byzantium." After receiving this order, Turkmen beys like Oghuzolu Mansur, Goktash, Anasuolu, Boa, and others left the Diyarbakir region with their groups. They moved north and raided Byzantine towns, districts, and villages. After that, they reached Erchish. Then they wanted to go to Azerbaijan and asked for permission from Stephanos, the Byzantine governor of the Lake Van area. They also sent him many gifts, but Stephanos refused and attacked the Turkmens. In the battle, the Byzantine forces were defeated and Stephanos was taken prisoner. After this, the Turkmens returned to Azerbaijan without facing any resistance. Because they followed the Sultan's order, Anasolu and Boa were forgiven. They received an official letter, Menshur, from the Sultan, giving them control of Diyarbakir and its region. Then they came again to this region, this time for the Sultan, and placed forces in places like Artud and other towns and districts. Later, they went to Silvan and had talks with the Marwanid Emir Nasr al-Dawla Ahmad about the administration of the region. But during this time, these two Turkmen beys killed each other during a fight. The Marwanid emir used this situation as an opportunity. To avoid looking like he was resisting the Seljuk Sultan, he called the Buyid ruler Abu Kalijar Fanahusra to act, and they managed to remove the Turkmens from their lands. As seen, these Turkmen movements, made partly against Byzantium and partly against Muslim lands, were not done according to the Seljuk state's conquest plans, even though the Turkmens were under the Seljuk rule in a federal structure. so these actions stayed outside the control and order of the state. Even during the time of Sultan Tugrul, after a while, the irregular Turkmen raids stopped, and the regular Seljuk armies started the conquest of Anatolia. After the victory at Dandanakan and the founding of the Great Seljuk Empire, new conquest plans were made. Sultan Tugrul took the responsibility for the western conquests himself and moved the capital from Nishapur to the city of Rey. So the official Seljuk campaigns and conquests in Anatolia began. As mentioned earlier, during the Umayyad and Abbasid times, there were many attempts to conquer Anatolia, and especially Constantinople. But these efforts failed because of the strong resistance from Byzantium, and so the conquest of Anatolia could not happen. But 100 years later, the Seljuk state, as the fresh and strong power of the Islamic world, which had lost its old strength, took on the mission to conquer Anatolia and succeeded in doing it. Sultan Tugrul, who began to manage the conquest of Anatolia from the new capital Rey, gave orders to several Seljuk princes. He sent Ibrahim Yunal, the son of his uncle Yusuf Yunal, to conquer the provinces of Hamadan and Isfahan. He gave Kutalmush and Resul Tekin, sons of his other uncle Arslan Yabgu, the task of conquering the Caspian Sea region. He also sent Hashan, the son of his uncle Musa Yabgu, and Yakuti, the son of his brother Chagri Bey, to conquer Azerbaijan. Big groups of Turkmens were also given to these Seljuk princes as military support. At that time, in eastern Anatolia and Azerbaijan, there were Armenian and Georgian peoples under Byzantine control. There were also Muslim rulers like the Shirvanshahs, the Shaddadids, and the Jafarids. Ibrahim Yunal, after conquering the Hamadan and Isfahan regions in a few years, continued his campaign successfully up to the banks of the Tigris River. Kutalmush, after taking the Gilan and Tarim areas, continued forward, crossed the Aras River, and entered the regions of Aran and Georgia. Meanwhile, when the Byzantine Emperor Constantine Monomachos sent an army under his Georgian commander Liparit to attack the capital Divin of the Shaddadids, Kutalmush moved to defend the city and gave Liparit a big defeat near Ganja, forcing him to retreat. At the same time, Prince Hashan made raids into the Pasan and Erzurum areas. He then moved into the Lake Van region, which had been taken from the Armenians and turned into Greek Vaspurakan by Emperor Basil II. Even though there was a peace treaty between the Seljuks and Byzantium, this campaign continued. The Byzantine governor of Vaspurakan, Aran, asked for help from Kekavmenos, the Byzantine governor of Georgia, because of the large Turkish army. In the battle between both sides in 1047, near the Great Zap River, the Seljuk forces were caught in an ambush and were defeated. Prince Hashan and his close friends became martyrs and lost their lives. Sultan Tugrul was very sad about the defeat of the Seljuk army and the death of Prince Hashan and his friends. So he gave a new mission to Ibrahim Yunal, who was the governor of Azerbaijan, and to Kutalmush, who was making successful conquests in the region of Aran. Their duty was to fight in Anatolia and take revenge for the defeat. Ibrahim Yunal quickly moved and, together with Kutalmush, entered Anatolia in 1048 with a large Seljuk army. Byzantine sources said this army had 100,000 men. The Seljuk army moved very fast. The Byzantine governors of Vaspurakan and Georgia, Aran and Kekavmenos, did not know what to do. They quickly asked Emperor Constantine IX for help. By the emperor's order, the Byzantine general Liparit gathered all the Georgian forces and joined Aran and Kekavmenos. Kekavmenos made a peace offer, but Ibrahim Yunal rejected it. Then, the Byzantine army, which had about 35,000 soldiers including Greeks, Armenians, and Georgians, set up a camp near the village of Ugumi in the Hasankale area. At that time, the Seljuk army led by Ibrahim Yunal and Kutalmış was following the Aras River and continued their advance. They captured some castles and strongholds, then moved toward the old city of Erzurum. Soon, they reached Erzurum, attacked and captured the city, and then moved to the Hasankale plain in the Pasin area, where the Byzantine army was located. There, they set up their camp. Now both sides were ready for war. In the Byzantine army, Katakalon was on the right wing, Aran was on the left wing, and Liparit was in the center. The Seljuk army had two parts. One part was under Ibrahim Yunal, and the other part was under Kutalmış. On 18 September 1048, a fierce battle started between the two sides. The fighting continued all day and all night. At the end, the Byzantine army was heavily and completely defeated. Commander Liparit was captured. Some Greek, Armenian, and Georgian soldiers who escaped death or capture barely made it to the castles of Van and Ani. Ibrahim Yunal personally took the captured Liparit and the valuable treasures they had taken to Sultan Tugrul, who was in the capital city of Rey. He brought the news of this great victory and the heavy defeat they had given to Byzantium. The Sultan congratulated Ibrahim Yunal for this important success. He even wanted to give him a reward of 40,000 gold coins, but Ibrahim Yunal refused it. Because of the defeat at Hasankale, and also because of the Pecheneg Turkish invasion in the Balkans led by Turak, Emperor Constantine was in a difficult situation. He sent an envoy to Sultan Tugrul with a peace proposal. He also contacted Nasser al-Dawla Ahmad, the emir of Diyarbakir, who had once served Byzantium but was now a Seljuk vassal. He asked him to help make peace with the Sultan. The Sultan welcomed the Byzantine envoy, who brought him very valuable gifts, together with the Grand Mufti Abu Abdullah. He did not take the ransom money that the emperor sent for Liparit and gave Liparit back to the envoy. Sultan Tugrul accepted the emperor's peace offer. To talk about and sign the peace treaty with Byzantium, he sent a delegation to Constantinople. This group was led by Sharif Abul Fazl Nasir, a relative of the Abbasid Caliph Qaim bi Emrillah, and they went together with the Byzantine envoy. After many meetings between Emperor Constantine and the Seljuk envoy, the following terms were accepted. The mosque and school built by Maslama bin Abd al-Malik during the Umayyad period would be repaired. The sermon, khutbah, that was read in the name of the Shiite Fatimid Caliph would be changed and now be read in the name of the Abbasid Caliph and the Seljuk Sultan on the mosque's prayer niche, mihrab, the bow and arrow symbols used by Sultan Tugrul, which were old Turkish signs of rule, would be placed. But one important point was not accepted. The clause that the yearly tax which Byzantium once paid to the Abbasid Caliphate must now be paid to the Seljuk state was refused by the emperor, even after long talks. Because the emperor did not accept this, he thought the Seljuks might start new campaigns in Anatolia. So he ordered the strengthening of Byzantine castles and forts, especially in eastern Anatolia, and the increase of military forces. After stopping the rebellion of his brother Ibrahim Yunal, who tried to create his own rule based in Hamadan, Sultan Tugrul made the central power of the state stronger. Then he started a new campaign in Anatolia. Actually, Sultan Tugrul felt the need to continue the conquest of Anatolia for two main reasons. First, the growing number of Turkmens made it necessary to find them land to live. Second, because the peace with the emperor was not fully agreed, and Byzantium was sending new troops to Anatolia. In 1054, Sultan Tugrul moved with a strong army. He crossed the Anatolian border and conquered Muradiyeh, northeast of Lake Van. Then he captured Erciş after a short siege. The Sultan continued moving north of Lake Van and came to the strong fortress of Malazgirt. He set up camp and started a heavy siege. The castle was defended by the Byzantine commander, Vasil. To take the castle quickly, the Sultan ordered tunnels to be dug and also brought a large catapult from Bitlis and began to bombard the fortress. At the same time, Governor Vasil was taking defensive actions. But soon, during midday, when the Seljuk soldiers were resting in their tents, a Norman soldier who secretly approached the catapult with a mix of sulfur and petroleum threw it at the machine. The catapult caught fire and burned. Although the Norman soldier was chased, he could not be caught. After this, the Sultan made the siege even stronger, but because of strong resistance from the defenders, he had to end the siege and pull back. At that time, the first of the three Seljuk forces sent by Sultan Tugrul moved forward in three directions. In the north, they advanced to the Caucasus Mountains, in the west to the Kanik forests, in the south to Turkan, Hanzit, and Erzincan. The second group passed through the region of Oltu and made raids on the lands beyond the valley of the Çoruh River. On their way back, they were attacked by a group of paid Frankish soldiers near Bayburt. In the fighting, the commander of the Seljuk forces became a martyr, but the Turkish soldiers successfully retreated. The third Seljuk unit, which advanced towards Kars, fought against the Byzantine governor Gagik. In this battle, the Byzantine army was almost completely destroyed. Meanwhile, Sultan Tugrul, who had ended the siege of Malazgirt, came with his army to Kars and besieged the city for a while. Then he continued his campaign by crossing the Pasin plain and advancing into the Erzurum region, and even further east to Ugumi. In this area, no Byzantine force dared to come out and fight him. After finishing his operations in northeastern Anatolia, Sultan Tugrul moved south again and returned to Malazgirt to start another siege. During the intense fighting, the big Seljuk catapult used by 400 men threw large stones that broke the walls. Seljuk soldiers attacked through the opening, but they could not succeed and had to retreat. Because winter was coming, Sultan Tugrul stopped the siege again, planning to return in spring to continue the conquest. Then he left the region with many spoils of war, and, on his way, he captured Adilchevaz, and then left Anatolia. Sultan Tugrul left Anatolia especially because of the rebellion of Arslan Besasiri, the military governor of Baghdad, who was a Shiite and acted against the Abbasid caliphate. After the Sultan left Anatolia, Ebulisvar, the Seljuk vassal and governor of Aran, continued the raids in Anatolia in 1055 with the help of Turkmen forces. He advanced as far as Ani and its surrounding areas. Because of this, the Byzantine Emperor Constantine sent General Nikephoros, who advanced to Dubail and Ganja, defeated Ebulisvar, and signed a treaty with him. In this treaty, Ebulisvar accepted Byzantine vassalage. On the other hand, although Sultan Tugrul did not personally lead the Anatolian conquest because of internal troubles in the empire, the Seljuk princes, emirs, and Turkmen beys he assigned continued the military campaigns against Byzantium in Anatolia. At that time, Yakuti, the son of Chagri Bey, came to the borders of Azerbaijan and Anatolia with a large Turkmen army and started raids into Anatolia. One of Yakuti's commanders, Sabuk, made continuous and successful raids into eastern Anatolia in the year 1057. The efforts of Nikephoros Bryennios, who was appointed commander of the Byzantine forces in Rumelia and Macedonia, were not enough to stop Sabuk's operations, and in every battle he fought with this brave Turkish commander, he was defeated. Also in 1058, other Seljuk units sent by Yakuti, made raids in the Kars region. They besieged the castles of Kars and Ani, but they could not capture them. Then these forces moved to the Pasin plain, besieged and attacked many towns and castles in this area, and captured Ugumi. Another Seljuk unit made raids around Malazgirt and Mush. In the same year, another Seljuk unit sent by Yakuti from Azerbaijan and Aran crossed into Anatolia and advanced to the Erzurum region, then further to Erzincan and Kema, and captured them. During this time, they also made raids around Harput. One part of these forces moved through the valleys of the Çoru and Kelkit rivers and captured Shebin Karahisar. A brave Turkish commander named Dinar, with a force of 3,000 men, moved in the direction of the Euphrates River and reached Malatya. The city was defended by a small Byzantine cavalry unit, but this unit was destroyed. The city was easily captured, and its surroundings were raided. It is said that Commander Dinar became a martyr during this fighting. The Seljuk forces stayed in the city for about 10 days and made raids in different directions. On their way back to eastern Anatolia and Azerbaijan, they did not hesitate to damage the Byzantine cities and castles they passed, and fought many battles. In 1059, by the order of Sultan Tugrul, Seljuk raids into Anatolia started again. Prince Yakuti, along with Horasan Saları, Kapar, Kikachich, as written in Armenian sources, and again Sabuk, entered Anatolia from the north of Lake Van, with a Seljuk army that carried black flags to show their loyalty to the Sunni Abbasid caliphate. Horasan Saları besieged Urfa, but because of the intervention of the Duke of Antioch, Kutsator, he was not successful. However, in the northern parts of Anatolia, Seljuk forces under the command of Emir Sabuk continued their forward movement and marched toward Sivas, which was under the control of Byzantine commanders Atam and Abu Sail. At first, the Seljuk soldiers thought the city's churches and towers were Byzantine army tents, so they paused for a while. But in July 1059, since both commanders ran away to Develi, the Seljuk army captured the city and its castle without any resistance. The Turkish forces held the city for only 1 week, but during this time they took many captives and a large amount of booty. On the other hand, after Isakios Komnenos, the new Byzantine emperor Constantine Dukas gave the duty to General Pankharas to stop the Seljuk military actions. Pankharas took action and attacked the Seljuk forces who were returning to their winter camps in Aran and Azerbaijan, with prisoners and loot taken from Anatolia. But in all the battles he entered, he was heavily defeated and scattered. After these continuous defeats and failures, Emperor Constantine Dukas could only send orders to the governors of the eastern provinces, telling them to repair the walls and castles of important Byzantine cities in Anatolia. He could not take any other serious measure. In 1062, Sultan Tugrul came to Azerbaijan and Aran and made sure these places were again under his control. He also checked and reviewed the Seljuk operations in Anatolia. Then he left this region to go to Iraq. However, to continue the raids in Anatolia, he gave a new mission to Prince Yakuti. This Seljuk prince, together with Horasan Saları and an emir called Chemchem, as written in Armenian sources, entered Anatolia and raided Bagan, Tulhum, and Ergani, north of Ergani. Later, with the help of Emir Nasser, who was the Seljuk vassal and ruler of Diyarbakir, they made raids in the valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Emperor Dukas sent Norman General Herve and the governor of Urfa, Tavdanos, to stop these raids. But there was no battle, because the Seljuk raiders had already returned to their base in Azerbaijan with prisoners and loot. However, these two Byzantine generals strongly besieged and attacked Amid, which was defended by Emir Nasser, with the help of Turkish forces. During the fighting near the Greek gate of the city, Turkish Emir Haçabashara was martyred. and General Tavdanos also lost his life. In these battles, both sides had heavy losses, so this Byzantine counterattack also ended without much success. During the rule of the first Seljuk Sultan, Tugrul Bey, the Seljuk military actions in Anatolia followed the river valleys in a regular way, according to the state's conquest plans. These movements reached as far as the Kızılırmak River. These actions were not full conquests, but they were important to prepare the ground for future conquests and settlement. Indeed, as a result of these raids, the Byzantine castles and strongholds in the west, up to Sivas, were largely damaged, and the Byzantine defense power in those regions was heavily weakened. In fact, Seljuk Sultan Tugrul could not personally take care of the conquest of Anatolia because of troubles inside the state and serious problems that shook the Abbasid caliphate in Baghdad. But the military actions carried out by the Seljuk princes and emirs he had assigned mostly remained as raids, not full conquests. Before starting his first campaign to Baghdad, Sultan Tugrul also worked to solve a conflict between Musa İnanç Bey, the ruler of Sistan, and Chagri Bey. Here is the situation. Because Musa İnanç Yabgu and his only surviving son, Buri, did not have strong leadership, they could not fully control or govern the region of Sistan. They also failed to stop the Ghaznavid attacks that happened from time to time. This situation caught the attention of Yakuti, the son of Chagri Bey, who had no land of his own to rule. So he went to his father and Sultan Tugrul and asked them to give him the rule of Sistan. After getting his father's approval, Yakuti immediately asked Ebul Fazl, the vizier of Musa Yabgu, to hand over Sistan to him. When the vizier refused, Yakuti marched to Sistan with his troops. At the same time, Chagri Bey also told the vizier to have the Friday sermon, khutbah, read in his name. On the other hand, Musa Yabgu quickly sent a request to Sultan Tugrul, asking him to stop the invasion of his lands. Then Sultan Tugrul sent a command to Musa Yabgu, his vizier Ebul Fazl, and the people of Sistan, saying that he did not approve the invasion of Sistan. He also sent a harsh message to Chagri Bey, telling him that his actions went against the decisions made at the Great Council in Merv. After this, Musa Yabgu sent his son, Buri, with a group of soldiers to Sistan and took control of the region from Chagri Bey's men. So the Sistan issue was solved peacefully. With the great conquests made in the east and especially the west, the borders of the Seljuk state were expanding, and its power was increasing. Because of this, the Seljuks were starting to become the dominant power in the Islamic world. Because of this change, the rulers of the Shiite Buyid dynasty, who had previously ruled over the Islamic world, began to feel worried and afraid that they would lose their power. At that time, the Buyids were using their military governor in Baghdad, Arslan Basiri, who was of Turkish origin, to heavily pressure the Sunni Abbasid caliphate. Because of the growing power of Arslan Basiri, who also made contact with the Shiite Fatimid Caliphate of Egypt, the Abbasid Caliph Qaim bi Emrillah, especially with the advice and influence of his vizier Abul Qasim, asked Seljuk Sultan Tugrul for help against the Shiites and invited him to Baghdad. When this was heard, there was great unrest among Basiri and the other Shiite Turks in Baghdad. Very soon, Basiri increased his pressure on the high officials close to the caliph, especially Vizier Ibn al-Muslima, and even began to remove them. At the same time, the Buyid ruler Husrev Firuz attacked Shiraz and its surroundings, which were under Seljuk rule, and stopped the Friday sermon, khutbah, being read in the name of Sultan Tugrul. Instead, he ordered it to be read in his own name. Because of all this Shiite pressure and attacks, Sultan Tugrul felt it was necessary to leave his campaign in Anatolia and immediately start a campaign to Baghdad. Meanwhile, the Sultan sent letters to Arslan Basiri and the other Turks in Baghdad, who supported him. He promised to give them gifts and rewards, trying to win their support. But when Arslan Basiri heard that the Sultan was coming to Baghdad with his army, he escaped to Rabba and declared that he was now under the rule of the Fatimids. The Turks in the city who supported him also said they would resist the Seljuk army. The Buyid ruler Husrev Firuz, after receiving a request from the caliph, showed obedience to the Sultan and took his soldiers out of the city. The Turkish groups in the city also told the Sultan that they would obey him and have the sermon read in his name. Soon after, in December 1055, Sultan Tugrul arrived in front of Baghdad with his army. He was welcomed with a great ceremony by the caliph's officials and the Buyid emirs. The Seljuk army stayed outside the city. Seljuk soldiers were entering the city to buy food and other goods, but while some Seljuk soldiers were shopping, they were attacked by Arslan Basiri's Turkish Buyid soldiers and other supporters in Baghdad, using a false excuse. These attackers even tried to march toward the Seljuk army's camp outside the city. Because of this, the Seljuk commanders in the camp took action quickly. They entered the city and successfully suppressed the rebellion and resistance in a short time. The neighborhoods where the rebels lived were heavily looted, and many of the rebels, including their leaders, were captured. However, to protect the Oghuz Turks, the famous Kur district of Baghdad, where the Shiites lived, wasn't looted or destroyed. After it was discovered that the last Buyid ruler, Husrev Firuz, was trying to provoke the people and soldiers, he was arrested by the order of Sultan Tugrul. He was later sent to Iran and kept in prison in a fortress. In this way, the Iraqi branch of the Buyid dynasty was completely removed. Soon after the rebellion was stopped, all the lands and properties of the Buyid and Turkish emirs and commanders, who had either escaped from Baghdad or were captured, were taken away from them. Later, Sultan Tugrul sent a special messenger to Caliph Qaim Bey Emrilla, who was very sad because of the rebellion, and comforted him with kind words. After bringing full peace and security to Baghdad, Sultan Tugrul moved into the Sultan's palace and placed his soldiers in the houses of Buyid commanders, soldiers, and Basiri's supporters. He also appointed one of his emirs, Ain Jalut, as the military governor of Baghdad. During this time, the Sultan increased the yearly income of Caliph Qaim Bey Emrilla. Then he gave the control of the former Buyid territories, Basra, Avaz, Khuzestan, and Arajan, to Hazaresp in return for a yearly tax of 360,000 gold coins. He gave the duty of organizing land and tax matters, Iqta system, to his vizier Kunduri. In this way, the Seljuk state began to represent the political and military power of the Sunni Islamic world, while the caliph only kept his spiritual leadership. After all these actions, Sultan Tugrul started rebuilding work in Baghdad. He destroyed the old buildings near the Tigris River on the east side of the city and built a great mosque, many houses, public baths, and a market. He also built a new royal palace. The new area, called Tugrul Bey City in the sources, was later expanded even more during the reign of the great Sultan Melikshah, with walls, new palaces, houses, and social buildings built around it. At the same time, Caliph Qaim Bey Emrilla was supposed to marry his son Zahiratuddin to Hatice Hatun, the daughter of Chagri Bey. But after his son died, the caliph himself married Hatice Hatun. She came from Hamadan to Baghdad, and they had a very grand wedding ceremony. In this way, the Seljuk state and the Abbasid caliphate began a closer and stronger cooperation. The removal of Arslan Basiri and his followers from Baghdad and thus the end of Shiite power, made the Fatimid Caliph Mustansir of Egypt feel worried. Now, Arslan Basiri, who was loyal to the Fatimids, formed a very strong army using a large amount of money from Egypt. He was also joined by the Shiite supporters who had escaped from Baghdad, and by the Kilab and Assadid tribes. Because Arslan Basiri was now ready for action, Sultan Tugrul sent Kutalmish and Quraysh, the Seljuk vassal and ruler of Mosul, with a Seljuk force against him. But during the battle in the Sincar region, Quraysh left the army and joined Arslan Basiri. As a result, the Seljuk army was defeated, and many Seljuk soldiers, including the wounded, were killed brutally. After this defeat, and despite the caliph's objections, Sultan Tugrul left Baghdad with his army after staying there for 13 months and 13 days. He set out against Arslan Basiri and his allies, taking Hezaresp with him, and later joined by Yakuti, the son of Chagri Bey. Soon, Arslan Basiri, who was in a difficult situation, had to escape with Quraysh to Rabba and then to Balis. Sultan Tugrul, continuing his march toward northern Iraq, captured Cizre. When he besieged Sincar, the heads of Seljuk soldiers who had been killed brutally were thrown down from the city walls. So the city was taken by attack, and all the criminals, including the emir of Sincar and the castle commanders, were caught and executed. At the same time, Sultan Tugrul organized a raid into the lands of the Marwanid Emirate of Diyarbakir, a Seljuk vassal, because they had helped Arslan Basiri and his allies. After appointing Ibrahim Yunal as Seljuk governor of Mosul and Inanç Bey, probably from the Seljuk family, as governor of Telefar, Sultan Tugrul returned to Baghdad. Because Sultan Tugrul had stopped the Shiite attacks and made them powerless, Caliph Qaim bi Amrillah welcomed him with a great ceremony. Very soon, the caliph accepted him into the caliph's palace and seated him on a special throne next to his own. During this meeting, with important Seljuk and Abbasid leaders present, the caliph thanked and praised Sultan Tugrul for his victory against the Shiites. He placed a crown on the sultan's head, tied a golden sword to his waist, and gave him a robe, a banner, and valuable gifts. The caliph also gave Sultan Tugrul the titles Ruler of the East and West, Partner of the Caliph, and Foundation of the Religion. With this official ceremony, Sultan Tugrul took over the leadership and political power of the Islamic world from the caliph. The Abbasid caliph was now only the religious leader of Islam. While Sultan Tugrul was moving against Arslan Basiri and his allies, Resul Tekin, the brother of Kutalmish, started a rebellion. He attacked and took control of the provinces of Basra, Avaz, Khuzestan, and Shiraz, which were given to Hezaresp as Ikta, land grant. Because of this, Sultan Tugrul, who was in Baghdad, sent Hezaresp with some forces against Resul Tekin. When Hezaresp came to Basra, he defeated Resul Tekin in battle and captured him. Very soon, Resul Tekin was brought to Baghdad. At the request of Caliph Qaim bi Amrillah, Sultan Tugrul forgave him and saved his life. Right after the rebellion of Resul Tekin was stopped, news came to Baghdad that Ibrahim Yunal, the Seljuk governor of Mosul, was also planning a rebellion. Sultan Tugrul, who was seriously worried, sent one of his trusted commanders, Savtekin, with a valuable robe and a horse, asking his brother to come to Baghdad immediately. Ibrahim Yunal obeyed his brother's order and came to Baghdad, where he was welcomed with a grand ceremony. But at the same time, Arslan Basiri and Quraysh took advantage of the situation. Only a few Seljuk soldiers were left in Mosul under the command of Aytekin, Erdem, Chamberlain Böritekin, and Yaruktekin. After a 4-month siege, Basiri and Quraysh captured Mosul. The Seljuk commanders barely escaped and managed to reach Baghdad. After the loss of Mosul, Sultan Tugrul, who was in Baghdad, organized a second campaign to Mosul and set out. Arslan Basiri and Quraysh, who did not dare to fight the Seljuk army, burned and destroyed Mosul and its surroundings, and then left the region. As the campaign continued, when the Sultan reached Nusaybin, he heard that Ibrahim Yunal had secretly left and was moving toward Hamadan with a large group of Turkmen soldiers loyal to him. Indeed, Ibrahim Yunal had now started a serious rebellion that deeply shook the Seljuk state. He received letters from the Fatimid Caliph Mustansir of Egypt and from his supporter Arslan Basiri, saying that they would give him great military and financial support and would recognize him as the Seljuk Sultan. It was even said that the Fatimids sent a large force to Arslan Basiri for this purpose. Understanding that the Seljuk state was in a dangerous situation, Sultan Tugrul, with only a small army, quickly left Nusaybin and started to follow Ibrahim Yunal. At the same time, the Sultan sent his vizier Amid al-Mulk Kunduri, his wife Al-Tunchan Hatun, and his stepson Enushirvan with some soldiers to defend Baghdad against Arslan Basiri. So, with very few soldiers left, Sultan Tugrul moved fast and reached Hamadan before Ibrahim Yunal. In the battle there, the Sultan was defeated because Ibrahim Yunal had an army of 30,000 men, joined by the sons of his brother Ertash, Mehmet, and Ahmet. Tugrul had to retreat into the castle of Hamadan, where he was soon surrounded by Ibrahim Yunal. In this very difficult situation, Sultan Tugrul sent letters to Kunduri, Al-Tunchan Hatun, and Enushirvan, asking them to come quickly with their soldiers. He also sent a letter to his brother Chagri Bey, who was seriously ill in Merv, saying, "My sultanate is about to fall. Please send help quickly." News of Tugrul's defeat and that Arslan Basiri and his allies were marching to Baghdad caused panic and fear in the city. Because of this, the Caliph did not want the Seljuk troops to leave Baghdad. As the situation got worse, Vizier Kunduri even thought about declaring Enushirvan as Sultan. But when Al-Tunchan Hatun tried to arrest her son and Kunduri, the vizier escaped to Avaz, and her son Enushirvan was chained and imprisoned. In this way, Al-Tunchan Hatun solved the succession crisis. She quickly set out to help her husband in Hamadan, taking with her Emir Inanç, Ömer, loyal Seljuk commanders, and Turkmens. Chagri Bey also sent his sons Kavurt, Alp Arslan, and Yakuti with a large army to help his brother in Hamadan. Soon after, in a second fierce battle near Ray, 2 August 1059, Ibrahim Yunal was completely defeated and captured with his nephews. They were handed over to Sultan Tugrul. Because Ibrahim Yunal had caused serious danger and crises to the state through his rebellions, Sultan Tugrul had him and his nephews executed, following the old Turkish tradition, by strangling them with a bowstring. Thus, the rebellion that seriously shook the Seljuk state was also crushed. While Sultan Tugrul was fighting against Ibrahim Yunal, Arslan Basiri, together with his ally Quraysh, marched with his army toward Baghdad. Since Ali Tegin, the Seljuk military governor of Baghdad, had no strong army, he was forced to escape to Avaz. So, on 27th December 1058, Arslan Basiri entered and occupied Baghdad with his soldiers, who carried white Shiite flags with the name of the Fatimid Caliph Mustansir. The vizier of Caliph Qaim bi Emrillah, Abul Qasim Ali ibn al-Muslima, and other high officials of the caliphate, as well as many judges and scholars, were taken as prisoners. In the great Mansur Mosque, the Shiite Friday sermon, Khutbah, was read in the name of the Fatimid Caliph Mustansir, and the Shiite phrase, "Come to the good deed," was added to the call to prayer. Adan, Caliph Qaim bi Emrillah took refuge with Emir Quraysh, who took him to his camp to protect him, and then sent him to the Haditha Ana castle on the Euphrates River under the protection of his cousin Muharish. According to historical sources, Muharish treated the caliph very well and even personally served him. The caliph's vizier, Abul Qasim Ali ibn al-Muslima, was caught and killed by being cut into pieces, and his body was hung and shown to the public. Meanwhile, Baghdad, especially the caliph's palace, was heavily looted and destroyed. Arslan Basiri issued an order saying the city should not be looted and people should be treated well, but he could not stop the looters. After defeating Ibrahim Yunal, Sultan Tugrul quickly moved toward Baghdad with his army to save it from Shiite occupation. At the same time, he sent a message to Arslan Basiri and Quraysh, demanding that they send the caliph and his wife, the Sultan's niece Arslan Hatun, immediately. As Sultan Tugrul got closer to Baghdad, Arslan Basiri quickly escaped from the city, which he had occupied for about 1 year. Soon, the Sultan arrived in Baghdad with his army and brought the caliph back to the city and placed him on his throne. The caliph, thankful for being saved, prayed for the Sultan and also put a sword on the Sultan's waist. Sultan Tugrul, after quickly restoring peace in Baghdad, launched a campaign against Arslan Basiri, taking with him his stepson Enushirvan, as well as Yaruktakin, Savtakin, Erdem, Humartakin, and some Arab emirs. At that time, Arslan Basiri had gone to a camp between Wasit and Hilla and was hiding with Dubays. He was caught in a surprise attack and immediately killed along with his men. His severed head was carried around the city and shown to the public, then placed in the head treasury. After this campaign, when the Sultan returned to Baghdad, he was greeted with great celebrations. All the people came out to the streets and celebrated this victory. Sultan Tugrul ordered the repair of the neighborhoods, inns, baths, and shops that were damaged during the Shiite uprising. He also appointed the great Seljuk commander Porsuk as the new military governor of Baghdad. After receiving the news of the death of his brother, the great commander Chagri Bey, who gave great service in the foundation of the Seljuk state, Sultan Tugrul returned to the capital Rey with his niece Arslan Hatun. Shortly after the death of Chagri Bey, Sultan Tugrul's wife, Altunkan, a powerful, wise, clever, charitable, and very mature woman, also died in the city of Zanjan and was buried in Rey. Before her death, Altunkan Hatun called Sultan Tugrul to her side and advised him, "Marry the caliph's daughter, Sayyida Hatun. In this way, you will gain honor in the eyes of God both in this world and the next." To fulfill the last wish of his beloved and respected wife, Sultan Tugrul decided to marry the caliph's daughter. According to Garsunime, who was an eyewitness of the events of this time and gave very detailed information, the Sultan sent his vizier Kunduri to Baghdad to talk with the caliph about this marriage. Long discussions were held in Baghdad. Normally, caliphs did not marry their daughters to foreigners. So at first, the caliph did not accept the Sultan's request. Later, he said he would agree only if he received a dowry of 300,000 gold coins and many valuable gold, silver items, and jewels. Shafi'i and Hanbali scholars gave legal opinions, fatwas, about whether the marriage could happen or not. Still, the caliph told Kunduri that the Sultan should cancel this marriage or I will leave Baghdad. Kunduri answered, "Then why did you make demands?" and left Baghdad. When Vizier Kunduri returned without solving the marriage issue, Sultan Tugrul became very angry at the caliph. He sent a strong letter full of threats and also ordered the Seljuk deputy in Iraq to take over all the caliphate lands. This caused great fear and panic among the caliph and all the caliphate officials. Soon, they managed to convince the caliph, and Ibn al-Mahliban was sent with a group to the Sultan to arrange the marriage. After this, the seized caliphate lands were given back. Then, in the region of Tabriz, a big marriage ceremony was held at Sultan Tugrul's tent. A big feast table was prepared, protected by elephants on both sides so that it would not be looted. About 4 to 5 months after the marriage, Sultan Tugrul went to Baghdad through Tabriz, Nakhchivan, and the city of Khoi. He was welcomed by the caliphate vizier Fakhr al-Dawla and stayed in his palace in Baghdad. Starting from 18 February 1063, a very grand wedding celebration was held for 1 week. In the palace yard, the 70-year-old Sultan Tugrul and other Seljuk officials danced happily, singing songs in Turkish. Later, the bride was brought from the caliphate palace to the Sultan's palace. After a while, Sultan Tugrul took his wife, Sayyida Hatun, and left for the capital Rey with his army. Because of this wedding, a gold medal was made in Baghdad. On one side of the medal, the names of the Caliph and Sultan were written. On both sides, there were a raised image of the Sultan and symbols of a bow and arrow. This medal was discovered by the famous coin expert, the late Ibrahim Artuk. After the death of Seljuk Bey, Ebu'l-Fawaris Kutalmish, the son of Arslan Yabgu, who became the head of the Seljuk family, and the father of the conqueror of Anatolia, Suleiman Shah, started a rebellion, like some other Seljuk princes, with the claim of the throne. After his father Arslan Yabgu, who had once led the Seljuks, was imprisoned and died in jail by the Ghaznavid Sultan Mahmud, Kutalmish argued that, according to tradition, he, as the eldest son, should have taken over the leadership of the Seljuks instead of Tugrul and Chagri Bey. Because of this, he started a rebellion against the state. Although the sources do not say exactly when Kutalmish rebelled, it is known that he left the army with his troops shortly after Ibrahim Yunal secretly left the Sultan during the Mosul campaign. Based on this, it is possible to think that Kutalmish cooperated with Ibrahim Yunal. Soon after, Kutalmish and his brother Resul Tekin, together with a large number of Turkmens loyal to their father, started a rebellion. But they could not stand against the Seljuk forces and had to take shelter in the strong Gurdku fortress in Jibal, April-May 1061. At that time, Sultan Tugrul was busy with his marriage plans with the caliph's daughter. However, while returning to Rey from Baghdad, the Sultan sent Baghdad's military governor Humar Tekin with some Seljuk forces to fight against them. Humar Tekin strongly besieged Gurdku fortress, defended by Kutalmish and his brother. But he was defeated in battles outside the fortress and had to retreat. This rebellion continued for a while, even after Sultan Tugrul's death, during the reign of Sultan Alp Arslan, who became ruler of the great Seljuk Empire. While returning to Rey, the capital, with his new wife, Sultan Tugrul became ill in a nearby place called Kasran and died 6 months later in Rey, before he could enter the bridal chamber. His body was buried in a tomb built in Rey by Farrukh Hatun, the mother of his stepson Suleiman, the wife of Chagri Bey. This tomb is still known today as Gonbade Tugrul. Rey, which is 22 kilometers from Tehran, looks like a typical Turkish town. Sultan Tugrul's tomb still stands proudly with its old grandeur. Although the caliph held an official mourning ceremony in Baghdad after Sultan Tugrul's death, Vizier Kunduri did not organize any mourning in the country because of the ongoing fights for the throne. Apart from his services during the founding of the state, Sultan Abu Talib Rukn al-Din Muhammad Tugrul, who stayed on the throne of the great Seljuk Empire for 23 years, made especially great contributions during the early period of the state's establishment.